Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is that time of the week again. It is time for Brendan and Brandon to tell you what's up about the Seattle Seahawks. And boy, did we have an active week. The combine came and went in full. We learned a lot of stuff. The Seahawks were active over the past week. They made a coaching hire. They made a coaching hire that, as of right now, is actually a secret. They have not yet disclosed. They have handed out an extension. They have released a couple of players. They've done things, and we are here to talk about it until we get to the bottom of it all. I am Brendan. I am joined by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Having a ball, man. We're going right into the fun part of the off season. So now it's starting to rev up.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So this is going to be a pretty big show here. We've got a lot of stuff to dissect, but personally, I don't see any need to bury the lead here. I don't see any need to bury the lead. And everybody out there already knows. If you're watching this stream, you already know what happened a couple days ago. But let's walk through the timeline here real quick. A couple days ago, I think it was Sunday. Well, I think it was either Sunday or Monday. I'm getting my dates mixed up a little bit. We learned that Geno Smith was going to be extended by the Seattle Seahawks. And the initial report was 3 years, $105 million, so $35 million per year. Then a couple days later, we learned that the contract was actually 3 years, $75 million, with incentives that could escalate it all the way up to $35 million. So basically $30 million in incentives that could take it from $25 million a year to $35 million a year. And today we found out even more about the particulars of the incentives. But before we dissect the minutia here, grand scheme of things, the big picture here, how you feeling?
Well, it's certainly on the surface of it at first blush appeared to be a little bit too much money for me and wanting to spend that. I felt like you weren't really then at that point at the mid-tier point in the quarterback market, like we were all trying to look at them hitting with Geno. Now you're getting in more of the top end of the market. There is certainly, with the incentives in this deal, as we talk about with this, there's a benefit to that to me. The benefit is that if the guy underperforms, you now get to save that money and roll it over to the next year and then have extra cap. That's the incentives of the incentives, because the incentives of the incentives, that's the benefit of the incentives, because of the fact that they count on the cap on the front end, meaning at the start of the season, when you have incentive money, it does sit there up at the front and counts fully on the cap that year. You can't go and spend that money, and then when he comes around, it doesn't work that way. So it's a good thing, and I don't want to undersell it. It's a nice thing to have players in a prove it situation. I love that. I love 1-year deals in the NFL for that reason in a lot of respects, because you're getting the most out of a player. They're not comfortable and fat and happy in their situation. They're going to try to go for it. So that part's really, really nice. To me, Brendan, where the rub is on this deal is down to the bonus money and the first year cap hits in year 1 and year 2. And once we find out the final numbers there, I'll await making any kind of final judgment on it. I'll agree with you that it looks way better now than it did at the first blush with the first numbers and how they were portrayed. But that's what I'm going to be kind of keying in on. It is going to be, Brendan, if we can correct a little bit of a thing that's out there from a narrative standpoint at this point, you're hearing people say $28 million in the first calendar year. And then they're translating that to that's what he's going to essentially count against the cap this season.
Right.
That's not accurate.
No.
There's bonus money here somewhere. And I'm saying this from an excitement standpoint, not to be a negative person on this, but to say this is actually going to be something that maybe even more, we might be even liking even more with the incentives that already make us go, wait, the incentives, I feel good about that. But then now you come to learn the bonus money so much that they lower down the hits so much through the first 2 years. He's getting the money on the front end, but they've got the numbers are massaged, is what I'm trying to say, Brendan. And essentially, we get to the de facto point that we were always trying to arrive at, which was the mid-quarterback contract.
All right. Well, earlier today, just a few hours ago, actually, we learned more about the Geno Smith contract. It actually does not have any incentives in it at all. It has escalators. And yes, there is a difference. So basically, Geno Smith has escalators tied to his performance in 2023. Because they are escalators, not incentives, the difference is they do not count against the cap at all. They will kick in for the following year.
There we go.
So if Geno Smith reaches his incentives that are not actually incentives, they become part of his roster bonus in 2024. And if he meets those incentives, again, they become part of his roster bonus in 2025.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Brendan. I can't think of any other quarterback doing a unique deal like this in the modern age. I'm not talking about top market. I'm just talking about any quarterback putting that or building that substantially into their contract.
And the fact that it's a roster bonus implies that there may be a 1 year out, a la Derek Carr's extension in Vegas, where he signed a big deal for $40 million a year, but there was an easy out after one. I think that's still possible. You know, it was like that thing where you had to release him within 5 days of the Super Bowl, but if you did, you barely had to give him anything.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are saying there's basically something like that in this deal. We'll have to wait and see more, but there's a lot to love about this contract.
Yeah, I mean the escalators then accomplish essentially what I was looking to accomplish the bonus, which is that we want to the end of this with the year 1 and year 2 of this deal. Let me back up a little bit here on this, Brandon. I won't go too long-winded on this, but if you're going to sign Geno, you're in a go forward approach. If you're signing Geno to where it's hitting your cap at 25, 30, 33 million, whatever it is that in that first year hit, you're going to struggle to accomplish that. And so if you're able to get this to where you can massage out the numbers, now there is the freed up cap space to go out there and truly attack this in a way to really be able to build around him substantially and really put together a Super Bowl contending team.
All right. So, just real quick, the incentives in the contract, just to lay it out in very clear terms here, it's $2 million per incentive to
Okay.
get to 4,282 yards, which is exactly what he had last year. 30 touchdowns, which is exactly what he had last year. A 69.76% completion percentage, which is exactly what he had last year.
Mm-hmm.
A 100.9 passer rating, which is exactly what he had last year. And if he plays 80% of the snaps and we either win 10 games or make the playoffs.
Is it a parlay? Does he have to do all that, or just is it what it's like 1 million for each?
It's 2 million each.
Okay.
And if he does all 5, there's an extra 5 million. So the idea being that, well, if he does all that again, you'll be happy to pay him that amount of money in 2024. So it's fine. But this feels like I don't think you ever really see contracts like this anymore. He is completely and utterly betting on himself to just perform high. And if he doesn't perform at a high level, he's not going to get that much money.
Well, and it's a deal that, yeah, you're right. This is definitely a deal that's pro the team in a lot of different directions here. The commitment angle, potentially the money angle. I was doing the rough math in my head, and I guess I come up to somewhere around $18 million in incentives per year on that then, Brendan. Is that right?
Well, it would be 15 million this year that applies to the next year, and then 15 million the next year that applies to the following year. So basically, it would be because there are no escalators for 2023 because he has to prove himself in 2023 to earn the escalators in 2024. Then he has to prove himself again in 2024 to get the escalators in 2025. And then the contract is up.
Do we know the base numbers though still yet?
We do not. That is the only thing we don't know.
So that's going to be, of course, I guess, again, just that part where we'll know. I want to know those kind of final numbers where they rub, but this is a good indication. This is a great indication for us because then again, Brendan, let's say this, he hits the escalators and then it goes to next year and you're saying it's a bonus. Well, then that does mean it's a bonus next year, but then that doesn't necessarily mean, I think if you're using your terminology the way I think you're meaning it, then that would be money he just gets instantaneous in hand, but then would spread over the last 2 years of the deal. So if he hits 10 million, it would only then cost the 5 million on next year's cap and then 5 million the year after that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the news right now. It says the upside comes via roster bonus escalators. So specifically roster bonuses, which I believe do spread out, as you said.
Yeah. So there you go. Where even if he's hitting these things now, it's not that you've substantially hindered yourself into year, 2 of the deal, where you've pushed these costs. Now the bill's due. You're pushing everything along here. And if Schneider's done this right, Brendan, and he's kept the base number might be then up there decently then with that, because then if Geno's counting on himself and he puts the base down low, I mean, that's where it's like in the year 1, like you say, if they've got a true out at that point after year 1, then the only way I could see Geno doing this, I'm thinking through this a little bit, Brendan, but the only way I could see him doing this is if there's actually kind of a little bit of a guarantee that the deal's going to go through the first 2 years of the deal, let's say, that there's actually some concrete, they can't get out after 1 year. so that then they could move the base numbers around. You see what I'm saying? Because if there's a bet on me thing with the escalators this year, he would then still want the base up high to give himself some kind of background insurance there. If that makes any sense on that, maybe a little bit.
It does, but I don't know. This contract to me kind of indicates that maybe Geno doesn't care about the money as much as I thought he would. So maybe there's just some aspect here that we couldn't have accounted for where Geno genuinely isn't that wrapped up in that kind of stuff.
If we can keep the first year contract hit under $20 million, it's in cumulative and on the front end, Brendan. I'm not talking about the escalators on the back. I'm just talking about this first year. They can keep it along that track, then they can still go out there and do some work out there in free agency and truly, build that team up at that point if they have the motivation to do so.
Did you see the Derek Carr contract?
I saw a few of the particulars of it. I mean, the bottom line was that they paid the extra money there, but they can get out of it. So that for their flexibility of it, which is the Saints the whole Saints front office thing, is about, they want that flexibility. This is why they're over the cap every year, is that they're always over the cap, but they always maintain this weird approach of wanting to have this strange kind of flexibility within that too.
Well, the reason I ask is because the cap hit for the first year of the Carr contract is $7.2 million. And then it blows up. So we probably didn't do anything like that, but it does illustrate the flexibility you have to mess around with a contract.
Didn't they do some bonus money with him though?
Let me see here. It's $28.5 million signing bonus.
So I mean, that's the thing, is that he gets the 7, which is some of that's bonus, but then that bonus accelerates. He goes back on the market only a year older and can go have another bite at the apple with that. So it's like, that's where this is Geno deal different. That's why I don't think there's a out on a 1 year. It might be that case, Brendan, but I would be surprised to see the out on the 1 year, because there's not, what you're saying is true. There is no bonus money really applied here, or it's a very small, tiny amount. If they are, it'd be smart for them to do so, Brendan. Like if you're giving him 20 million here in bonus, then it would be smart to do it that way with this, to where then you can lower that base even further down, as opposed to having this make this all base on the front two end deal of the structure, where the cost now is I think would be a little bit bigger and more expanded.
Right. And I made a video earlier today breaking down this deal, because I do believe this is basically unprecedented, at least recently, especially with quarterbacks. Every quarterback we've ever seen, except for Brady, always tries to get as much money as they can at every opportunity. Yeah, and, there were a lot of comments on that video I made where they basically said, hey, we never got this with Russ. And I was like, you never got this with just about anybody.
No, you're 100. You're on the nose with this, Brendan, in the respect of, this is not what quarterbacks do in this league. You can count on your hand the amount of quarterbacks in the last 20, 30 years of football who have taken a discount for what they could get on the open market in order to help the team out. And this applies to quarterbacks, not just like Russ, but a Drew Brees type or an Aaron Rodgers type, where they're grabbing every last dollar bill that they can grab while they're making more than double that of whoever else is on the roster, and showing this weird, I want a stronger roster. Why don't I have more talent? Why don't you guys have more built around me? Give me more money. Okay, that's 1 + 1 = 2, buddy. So smart of Geno to see this and everything he's saying, Brendan. Let's just be on the signing the contract. I'm stoked for everything this guy brings, as far as he does everything else right that you'd like to see ideally from the press conference, the way he talks, the way he goes about his business. He just sounds hungry as hell. He's counting on himself. He wants to finish as a Seahawk. It doesn't feel somewhat blind, empty talk like someone else who might have used to say that same kind of thing. I'm stoked about the future with this guy, especially if you can build a team up around him. With this deal now in tow and looking the way it does, Brendan, and how he has structured it, it's hard not to. I mean, hell, that's, like you said, nobody else does this, and not taking money, Brendan. Nobody does escalator stuff. The escalator stuff you might put in like $1 million, right? Like it might be some escalators that's like, okay, if I make the Pro Bowl, that's $1 million. If I get us to the conference championship, that'll be $1 million. But you don't see it where somebody embeds like $15 million of their salary on a yearly basis into the portions of the deal in that way.
Absolutely. 2 more facts that I want to lay out before we, when thinking about this contract. Number 1, week 1 of 2023, there are going to be 32 starting quarterbacks, right? 32. There's a very good chance that come week 1 of 2023, every single quarterback who is starting, who is not Geno Smith, will either be making more money on an average annual value basis than Geno Smith, or be on a rookie contract. There will probably be one or two exceptions, like maybe Sam Darnold signs a stopgap deal for 10 million and starts, but
Mhm.
that would be different, right? That's like, oh, we don't expect anything. We just need a warm body for a year. Or maybe
Agree.
Teddy Bridgewater does that. Or maybe Tannehill gets cut, signs a small deal to like prove that he can still play. Something, that could happen.
Mm.
But Geno Smith is probably going to be at the bottom of the list of veterans. The only guys making less will be the guys still on their rookie deals.
And even those other guys you mentioned will only be on 1-year deals at that point. So even those
Mhm,
guys you mentioned, he would be the only quarterback on a multi-year deal, like you said, not rookie then at that point, because all the rest of those guys will be on their sort of prove it, come in here, maybe be a backup, maybe compete to start type thing.
mhm.
And yeah, it's substantial, Brendan, because you are finding that, as I've said, it's the place that we've not seen the NFL be established in this place recently, and we're seeing it even now, like you're saying right now. Going into next year, we can see it's not going to be established next year, absent maybe this Geno situation, which is the blue collar quarterback contract. That one that truly does fall sort of right there in that middle state where the quarterback is making a good amount of money, but he's not making all of the money or taking this huge, three slices of the pie chunk out for himself. It's like you're taking thirds, you get thirds. Like, then, maybe we'll give you, seconds, but not thirds. And
Mhm.
that's what they're wanting. And so you've got a quarterback in this situation now that you've maybe been able to avoid that with. And it is exciting because I've always believed when you save that money, and this is what I harped on with Russ through the years, like, just pull back on that a little bit. You'll get a better overall team. They can go buy a guard to get in here for you. Go do that route with it. Let's see what that can do. Let's see what that can bring about for you. But we're going to see now, Brendan. We're going to find out if in those savings they're able to build a better, fuller, more prominent team that can go out there and really more, truly contend at that point, as opposed to doing the one and done playoff dance.
And one other thing.
Mhm.
If Geno Smith meets every escalator in his contract over the next 2 years, which
Mhm.
would basically make him a Pro Bowl level quarterback at the minimum,
Mhm.
like those stat milestones I mentioned just now that would be the makeup of a Pro Bowl quarterback, unless he's Jameis Winston, also throwing 30 interceptions at the same time. If he does that, the average annual value of his contract goes up to 35 million, which is still not even going to be top 12 among quarterbacks going into this upcoming season. So even if he plays phenomenal football over the next couple years and gets every dollar out of the contract he has, it's still not even top 12.
It's money you're happy to spend. The whole point of it with these spending this money and these quarterbacks is that you spend the money and then they don't carry the team in the way to equivalent towards what you're spending on them. You see them, a lot of them will vastly underperform or be middling. And so now you have something built in there to where you've got protection if that doesn't happen. But if he does play that way, first world problems. And even then, as he's making this stuff, I'm sure him already showing this kind of flexibility, Brendan, would show me that he's also probably going to be willing, then, dare I say, be willing to be flexible on into the future if you want to try to make some numbers as well, be working down the line. That's also what this is a little bit of a signal towards. So hard at this point to pick this deal apart in light of
Yeah.
these recent developments.
Yeah. And also, the nature of this contract leaves us very flexible to spending a draft pick, maybe even a high draft pick on a quarterback this upcoming draft.
It's in
So
play.
can't rule it out.
It's absolutely in play. Some Hawk fans are just one go whole. I get the let's just go all in on getting the positional players and use every pick for every point that you need. But I'm sure we'll discuss this quite a bit through this draft season. You're not going to be sitting here very often in the future. You're not going to be sitting here very often in the future with the opportunity to take a quarterback who very well, as we talk about with these combine performances, may be one of the may become the best quarterback of this entire class when it's all said and done.
Right. So the last thing I'm going to say about Geno here is the sentiment I want to push is I know that there are plenty of Seahawks fans out there that didn't like Geno that much. They don't think he's that good. They don't think he's all that. They weren't really into the idea of bringing him back and all that. But after this contract, I hope you will understand. I just hope people understand I'm going to call it a sacrifice, even though that would be a weird word to use for some people because he's still making tens of millions of dollars. Like, this guy is doing something that nobody else does. This guy is backing up his talk in a way that no other quarterback except for Brady did. And that was because Brady had his stupid TB12 method, which, by the way, are you feeling like this contract might signal there might be a GS7 method coming down the pipe in the next couple months here or something?
Well, that's it's GS team or GS7 team or GS7 the method, GS7 PNW. I don't know. He's kind of workshopping stuff, I'm sure, right now.
Yeah. But what I'm just saying
No,
is
it's PS I don't write back.
he did copyright that. I don't know how much money he's ever going to make off of that, though. I don't think that's a phrase people use that often.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is I hope the people who don't like Geno that much can appreciate and understand what he's done for us here.
Yeah, he's as we've tried to kind of illustrate. And if you're not hearing at this point, I don't know. These are not quarterback contracts you see in this modern era. Everybody's getting paid. Look what just happened with Daniel Jones, who threw 15 touchdowns last year. It's absurd, these contracts, and these quarterbacks take every last dollar on the table. It's like these teams come in meekly to the negotiations because they want to hold on to the quarterback, and they're like, well, here's all the money on the table. I mean, you could have it all if you wanted. We really do want to build the rest of the team, though. And the quarterbacks just come in like those gnarly characters in the thing and just and pull it all over into their self and like, I'll take it all. And you got to hear now in Geno, and he's doing something that's not like, no, I'll take all of it, but this little tiny chunk. With him doing it this way, with the structure of the escalators, how it hits with the bonus front, how that then spreads out, you're allotted something here, which is, as I've said at the start, the thing I want to see in these negotiations, which makes me happy in it, which is the true blue collar contract. It doesn't exist, as Brendan was illustrating with the numbers moving into next season. This type of contract doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because not the teams aren't willing to do it. There's plenty of teams out there in the NFL who would love to hand out more blue collar contracts. It doesn't happen because there's not the quarterbacks who are willing to take that punch, make that sacrifice, take a little bit less, understanding the bigger picture at play.
Yeah, think about it this way. If there is a recent comp to Geno Smith in the NFL, it would be Ryan Tannehill. They were both highly drafted. They both washed out at their initial stop. They both went to another team. Now, Geno took a few stops in the middle. They went to a new team. They had a breakout season, and then they got the big money. Tannehill's contract was signed either 3 or 4 years ago, and it was significantly bigger and more lucrative than the contract Geno just got. That's 3-4 years ago.
Agreed. The Jimmy Garoppolo signing at San Francisco 4 years back when they traded for him blindly without him even starting but 2 games for New England Patriots. They paid him a higher equivalent, a higher paying price, a much bigger cost of the cap just with him walking in the door there in San Francisco. 100%.
Yeah. All right. So we got one super chat here. It's Big Patty Daddy. Thank you for the $4.99. What's up, fellas? Win-win situation here. Number 1, Geno keeps up the hype and we pay him. Number 2, he doesn't get incentives. I love it. Thank you, Geno. #team player. Yeah. And, like I said earlier, you don't see quarterbacks do stuff like this. You pretty rarely see any player in the NFL do stuff like this.
You don't. It's as I said, to say count on my hand. That's not overstating it. It's the player, and I understand players not doing it. Any other positional player, I wouldn't be looking at them saying, hey, well, if you could just, take a little bit less for the team. It's short careers, you get injured and your career can be ended at any point in time. But when it does come to the quarterback, you do sometimes say, hey, maybe you could just take a little bit less. But here's the thing above that. I wouldn't ask that of a guy that's never been paid. Like Geno really never has been. And he's doing this as a guy where this is his one potential big payday here. He's not doing like, well, this is his 3rd contract. And he's like, look at how noble I am on my 3rd deal. See how much giving I am. And no, you're doing it when you haven't gotten that bag yet. And you got to appreciate that much more and, clap and applaud and stand up and be like, yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. And he has the opportunity to earn good money if he performs at a high level. Although there's no scenario where he becomes one of the top paid guys, which surprises me. Again, like you said, Daniel Jones has never had a good season, and he just got $40 million a year.
Agreed. Yeah. He didn't earn the contract there. And look, you want to wind that contract a little bit into the reasoning behind it, and you go, well, there's a reason this isn't working out for that. They're doing this, and it's not simply that they're trusting in Jones's talent and hoping he's taking the step forward. They're doing because they want to apply the franchise tag to Saquon Barkley, which they couldn't do if they had to apply it to Daniel Jones. So now that starts to instruct them. We can't lose Saquon for nothing. So it's like, well, and we kind of like this guy, and we haven't given him receivers. And here's the other thing they did, Brendan, is that they did that cardinal rule Sin I talk about, where you get the quarterback first and then you don't build the team around him first. You get the quarterback first and then you start trying to work it all in. Then
Yeah.
it fails and you can't make your proper assessment of the quarterback, and then you end up paying him like they're doing here a little bit. It's a tale of two ways of doing it. Giants way shows desperation. Our way shows intelligence, self-sacrifice on the part of Geno Smith. Very exciting to see.
K Soon, thank you for the $4.99. Can you guys contrast and compare your recent mocks? Great work to both. BTW. Seriously. We will definitely be doing some of that, but personally, I'll say for myself here, I think this would be better after free agency when we have a better idea of what the mocks could shape out to be.
Yeah, I think free agent, especially being that we're this close with free agency, allowing it to kind of go through, it will instruct things so much more intelligently, I think, soon, in the way this goes. And not just that, but the trades. You've your Aaron Rodgers domino that falls, your potential Lamar Jackson domino that falls, and then all of the kind of ripples that fall out from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like the people love mock drafts. People love the mock drafts. That's why I do them every couple weeks. But I'm also aware that like it's a little bit weird trying to make one when you don't even know what your team has done in free agency yet.
It's true. It's true. It's not. It's going to be very inexact, as opposed to once we get closer, they'll be a lot more closer to actually being. I think with some, there's a moderate level of potential accuracy here, but I think it's way closer to the mark once you're through free agency, and no doubt about it.
Yeah, but we're going to have a lot of draft stuff in the very, very near future. I've actually starting to put together my video schedule for that entire month and a half.
It's a fun time this time of year, and especially you got this many picks, because you just get so excited about all the possibilities and iterations this could take.
Okay, so I think that's enough time spent. Well, okay, one more thing about the Geno thing. A statement that Geno made kind of implied that he did this because there was an understanding that the money he saves the team would go towards improving the team. So, do you think we can take anything from that statement to say maybe this is the offseason they finally start spending some money?
Well, we're making to make this guess and prediction. We're doing it blind. We're not blind in the dark, but we're doing it with just a little bit of hope in our heart, but blind a little bit in the dark too, right? Because it goes so against what they've done in recent history so often that you go, I want to predict this, but I've tried so often before. I'm like the jilted lover here, Brendan. I've gone to the altar, and I've been left there every time, and the priest is like, it's okay. I'm sure she still really likes you. Yeah, okay, okay. So here's what I would hope to take away from this, Brendan, that maybe gives me a little bit of a beacon on this one that's differently from prior years. The sense of urgency. We may have a team sold within this next year to year and a half. The Carroll and Schneider being comfortable and having a seat where they're not having to feel the feet or any kind of warm seat underneath them, maybe starts to warm up a little bit, just a little bit with that, because the new owner is very likely to want to turn it over naturally if things are even kind of going partially well. Beyond that, though, how much longer does Coach Carroll want to run this through? How much maybe was this informed by the fact that you wanted to go for this because Coach Carroll maybe isn't trying to plan to coach till he's 80 years old? I made it's a little bit premature to make that prediction, but again, with new ownership coming in, he's looking at that coming up ahead. He's going, oh, okay, we're already not a lot of coaches in the NFL history that have gone to being in their 80s as a head coach through its 100-year period. So I wonder if maybe that's one thing that can give us a little more hope that they do go forward and they do that. And I was doing a show last night around, Brendan, how they can create a lot of cap space without having to really bend over backwards and rip themselves in two from a future standpoint to get it done. Along with now the savings potentially here on the first year hit of Geno's deal, you could make some headway here in free agency if you really want to go. But it just takes that will, as we always talk about, to really be, hey, we're going for it this year. The NFC's weak. Let's go.
It just kind of seems to me that if you don't do it now after what Geno's done, that's kind of messed up, because part of the reason why he's doing it has to be, well, if I do this, I'll get a better team around me. If you don't give him that better team, that's I don't think he'd be thrilled. I remember there were years where Brady would take those discounts in New England, and then Belichick kind of wouldn't really do anything with it. He would just kind of stick to my process, stick to my process. And the team would always, and he would end up throwing the ball to like Rashae Caldwell in AFC title games. He would end up with like 40-year-old Troy Brown as his number 2 receiver. And I remember thinking like, man, those discounts are not really going anywhere, are they?
They really weren't. You're 100% on the nose with that one, man. It always I could never understand why he did it that way, and especially when they got such returns when they did it to like even a small degree where it wasn't really that with the Randy Moss thing, because Randy was a depressed asset at that course of the
Right.
Raiders, where so it wasn't like they were giving up the moon for him, but why you wouldn't? Why? I mean, it frustrated me a little bit through the years with Russ, where you spend the money on Russ, but it's like, well, we still want to counterbalance with our defense. It's like, look, if you want to be a defensive coach and build your super defense up, build it. If you want to have your quarterback, you're going to pay top 5 market money, top 3 market money, then build around that guy, in my opinion. Just as I always say, choose the lane, and there wasn't really them choosing that lane with this. But I would be shocked if they didn't with these savings they have. There are some other things with those, Brenda, because again, we always wonder how much money is there in the kitty? How much does Jody have to spend right now? Is she in a point right now where they've got to be just trying to liquidate everything, or is she able to come out with the $50 million signing bonus here and a $30 million signing bonus there and a $20 million sign? Is that in the pocketbooks right now? Maybe. I hope so. And I would love to see it, Brendan. I think you look at, as I said, the NFC's weak this next year. We look at in our own division. Rams are showing every sign that they may be going into like a sub-tank mode next year. Leonard Floyd's on the
Yeah.
market. Jalen Ramsey's on the trade market. Both those guys likely to be moved and or cut. Not Ramsey, but definitely Floyd if they can't find a trade partner there. They're losing some guys in free agency. Now's maybe a good time to strike.
Yeah, Stafford is supposedly on the market, although good luck with that.
Just don't take an x-ray of his back, right?
Yeah. Don't look at anything. Don't look at how he played last year. Just do it blind. We'll send you some tape of him from Georgia, and then you can make your decision based off that.
Exactly. A picture of a Super Bowl ring. That'll be the sales job on that one.
Yeah. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99. What Geno did was a homie deal, and any homie of yours is a homie of mine. Love the collab, guys.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. I've got a lot of comments lately. Ever since that deal came out, like a lot of people are like, okay, time for me to get a Geno jersey. And like I know Geno's not the best quarterback in the league. He's never going to do what Wilson did here. He won't be as good as Wilson was in his prime. But I think that for a lot of the fan base, he may end up more beloved than Wilson was by the time this is all over because of stuff like this.
If he raises a Super Bowl trophy, he will be.
Mm-hmm.
That's there. You can't really debate that with me as much as Russell has time, and he'll have his people who definitely have him backing. But I think with the exit of Russell at that point, he would certainly be raised up in that higher point with his background, with his story, where he's coming from. When he says the things he talks about and being humble and all that stuff, you believe it in him, and it comes off as true, and it comes off as real, and it's backed up in his actions. That's the thing with these, when you have these words at the podium and you say these things, they need to be following along with actions you see that aren't necessarily all you out in the open on an Instagram account. And that is carried forward with Geno for quite a bit of time here from this whole process, is that he's been upfront with what his intentions and what he wants to do. The stories you're about, like Carol talking about the next day after they lost the playoffs, he was in the weight room, in their grind. He didn't have a contract, right? For all intents and purposes, could have been out there in Cabo, sitting out on a beach, just relaxing. And where was he? He was in Renton, out there lifting weights, preparing himself for next year. Like the day after the game, he's in the way you want your guys to be in, and especially your quarterback. Look at all these other teams like the Cardinals having to put in contractual obligations in order to get their contract just to study. And you got a guy here the day after the season ends in there lifting weights, preparing himself, saying, hey, we got something going. It's that same kind of feeling, Brendan. Remember we had that feeling of Russell in 2012 after the Falcon game of like, we just missed it. Boy, you guys wait till next year. You wait to find out what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely get behind that. So I think we're all pretty happy about that. I don't think very many Seahawks fans are going to be unhappy. If for you to be unhappy about this deal, you must think Geno's just terrible. That's really all there is to say about it, I think.
Some people have their opinions and they become ingrained, and you can't do anything to wash it out. It doesn't matter kind of what they see. Absent, again, him probably raising a Super Bowl trophy, and even then they'll be like, well, I mean, the team was really good. He took a discount. He's not good. He just took a discount. The team's, it'll be one of those, you're just whack-a-mole.
Okay. We had a little bit more news earlier today. We released a couple players. One very expected, the other mostly expected as well. Gabe Jackson and Ben Burke-Hervin, both gone, saving a grand total of about $7.5 million against the salary cap. I think we all expected this one, but any thoughts? Anything you want to say?
I think it's a good indication that they're looking to be active here in free agency to some degree, Brendan. How active that is, we'll see with it. And some of this depends again on how much, true room is, kind of created here with what we've got with the Geno deal, which is uncertain at this point. I ran the numbers last night. I won't take up a ton of time with this, but I ran the numbers last night and I had included, it was kind of funny. I didn't know he was going to be released. I just was doing it beforehand, but he was obviously going to be released at some point. But I think that the guys that you could reasonably release here this offseason, or there's four main moves. I guess there's five moves here, Brendan, that I think could create some substantial cap space. Gabe was one. Obviously, Ben Kervin's $1 million. You're saving on that, 950,000, whatever he was. Quentin Jefferson at $4.5 million. Brian Monet at $2.67 million. And then what you do is you convert to me the base to bonus of Shelby Harris, and then just put a void year on the back end of it, $3.25 million.
Okay. Okay.
And then at that point, I'm not signing him to necessarily a contract extension, which I think we'd all have a little bit of hesitancy doing with the year he just came off of, which was certainly a down year versus what he did in Denver, on top of being a little bit more injured than he was at Denver. That saves a kind of a substantial amount of money off that already alone with the cap on that, to where you could clear some space out and go make some noise out there in free agency at that point. And this maybe is an early indicator that they're starting to take a stab in that direction. Quandre Diggs was the other guy where you could convert his base to bonus this year, slide out half of them, basically take down his base to half. You already have another year on his deal, so you're not creating a void deal. So you save all that money, Brendan, on guys you're going to release anyway, or you only have one void year with all that money you save, which comes out to somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think I had it at like 20. I got the number here. Hold on. 25 million. Well, about 22 million or so, 23 million that you can create with that. And Sports Track, by the way, the other thing was the Sports Track counts those guys, the roster fodder on the bottom end of it. That's another $10 million in that as well.
Correct.
So of guys that are just going to be practice squad, 220,000 a year players on the other end of it.
Yeah. And also don't forget, you can restructure Lockett. You can save a few million if you do that, which I actually am kind of in favor of, because it's starting to look like he's just never going to get hit again. So maybe he can play until he's 40. I don't know.
Amen. That's what I'm saying. I think you're in the same boat I'm in with this, is that we're not advocating for this team to do Ram-like moves. We're not saying dump first round picks from the future, or put a bunch of guaranteed money that we bury somewhere down the far line. We're just asking for some small moves that could create a substantial amount of cap space to now. You signal with Geno, it's go time. You and I both would have been, I think, in the same boat if they had gone the opposite route and they said, nope, patient, right? We're just going to do the slow roll approach. You and I think would have both been, okay, we understand, we get it. But you've gone down this go. Let's go now, right? Let's engage and let's push this forward a little bit. So
yeah, you could do it with Disley too, by the way. You could. I don't know if I would, but you could.
You could. I think the point being is that you set yourself up from a cap standpoint as you bled out all of the blood last year. You took out all of the bad money deals off the books at that point to engage into this year, to now have flexibility where even if you don't have a lot of as much seemingly cap space on the front end at first blush, you actually do in your flexibility, especially when you count it up against those teams like we were talking about with the Saints, or what that get themselves in cap kind of hell to begin things in the offseason on a yearly basis by how they set up their contracts.
Right. You could actually do the base to bonus conversion with any player, by the way, pretty much. Like the Bills did something with Micah Hyde, where they took off about a $3.5 million cap hit, split it into three, and then put it in each of the following years in a void year. And like that 1.1 million cap hit in the next 3 years means nothing to them. But the $3.5 million they saved this year is actually kind of important. So you can do little things like that to make it go a little further.
It adds up fast. And then you talk about signing even big money market deals. You can lower down the first year cap hit of that if you structure it right. And so now you're able to stack that many more players in free agency. Essentially, Brendan, the opposite approach of what our Hawks have done in recent years when they've had money to spend, which has been a multitude of one-year deals that now add up very quickly. There's no bending them off. You're not converting any base to bonus. You're just letting your contracts run through naturally, and only converting if you have to. Where this would be a little bit more of a proactive approach. But to me, it makes a lot of sense in going with it. If the NFC was in the state of the AFC, we might have a little more hesitancy here. I get that it will be a young roster. All the much more reason why, Brendan, though, to be active in free agency, because you can round out some of those veterans who can come in and get these young guys trained up right. So it's the best of both worlds, where you got the young guys coming up on deck, but you still got the guys that are the elder guys with something in the tank, providing some impact and maybe some tutelage at the same time.
Right. It all sounds good to me. I'm pretty excited to do that. One thing about BBK that should be thrown in here is the implication is that his career is over, because Pete basically said that if he ever plays football again, it'll be in Seattle. So the implication is, well, we discovered that he's just never going to play football again, so we released him.
It's the implication.
Yeah.
I always think about the sunny, always sunny in Philadelphia bit on that. And
Yeah.
it's the implication.
Yeah. So he was a UW legend, so that is kind of sad in its own way. I will say that.
It's great. A guy that I was excited about coming out of college quite a bit for how fast a guy he was giving you, though. The undersized thing is the thing you worry about with guys. You know, it's something that you do get concerned about. But yeah, that sometimes these injuries, you can get the one that's just the worst one, hits you in the worst way, and you just can't bounce back from it. I don't know if his fit would have been here anyway. Brendan, would being a 5'10" guy at his size as a middle linebacker and a 3-4. I think he would have had to probably eventually anyway go to a more of a kind of 4-3 based team if he had a chance in the NFL to go on,
Yeah.
which it doesn't
He
sound
would
like.
probably be a special teamer and nothing else.
Yeah, agreed.
Mhm. The only other bit of news that happened in the last week would be that we hired what is known as a pass rush specialist coach, which I don't think we had last year.
Mhm.
Brandon Jordan of Michigan State, the Spartans. And he also apparently runs a camp where a lot of prospective NFL players attend.
Mm.
And he's had
Mm.
like 200 players pass through this camp over the last decade plus, including guys like TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, what's the Browns guy, Miles Garrett. Not all pass rushers, by the way. Like DK Metcalf apparently went to this camp as well, but it's called like BT, which is like Brandon trained
Mhm.
or something like that. So, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean it's I think it's good because I think it's maybe a little bit of a recognition in the lack of development from pass rushers here in the last few years. I'm not looking to make this a point of bashing on Hurt with this, but you know, he came from the defensive line point with a lot of guys where you went like, well, who did you really develop during, you know, your time? Like what are your, you know, what's your resume here on these guys that you've taken as prospects and brought them forward substantially? And certainly a guy like Daryl Taylor, a lot of times through his development seems stunted a little bit. Um, you did never see the LJ Collier come forward in the where he was coming from with it. Um, it just it's not been necessarily the best. And pass rush has been one of those places that I think that they've had openings on their defense, and a couple of those places to improve over the last few years. Get guys a little bit more well rounded out. It's when you see a guy like Uchenna Nwosu come in with his bag and his moves and his different things he can do as a rusher to set guys up versus some of our guys that are very rudimentary and simplistic in their approach, where you're like, you know, they're just trying to run like Taylor, where he'll just try to run to the edge every time, you know, like I'm going to get to the edge. And whereas Jenna will be like, karate chop, you know, back inside, counter cross face move, you know, spin back out, come back around. Like there's just more going on. He's got more that he's developed there. So I think they could stand to bring that in. And hey, I think you kind of maybe subtly point if you meant to or not. Maybe there's a little bit of a subtle bit of recruiting here that kind of goes on here in a way with this guy working with other players throughout the league.
Yeah, it's exciting for Mafe more than anything, I think, because
Yeah,
that's a guy who
absolutely.
needs that development for sure.
100%. 100%.
Right. Apparently, we have hired a new associate head coach to replace Sean Desai, but they can't disclose who it is yet because it's not official.
Yeah, I guess that means there's kind of I think this only makes sense as the one guy to me that this makes sense as being. Otherwise, it could just be somebody who just weren't even considering. It's got to be some former Carroll acolyte, I would think, or Ed Donatel, somebody that he's been very close with through the years. I think that's the likely guy that's going to come out. I've long
Yeah,
thought.
could it be one of his kids?
I hope to God not.
You know, you say that, but Nate Carroll's actually probably been one of our better position coaches lately. Receiver coach. He's been good.
I feel you on that. I'm not trying to throw shade at Nate, and I don't want to the look of it is not a great look,
I
and
agree.
especially when you've had so much internal without just professional nepotism in your hiring that hasn't always brought you great returns. I think it would be a bad look. So he may
Yeah.
very qualified, but you know your last three defensive coordinator hires have come from in house. You gotta. It's not a great look.
Yeah. I think I'm with you there. Okay, so I think that's mainly the news of the last week. There are a few other little things, but until they blow up into bigger things, I don't think we need to really spend time on it. So I think that it's a good time to turn the page and look back at the recent NFL Combine, the Underwear Olympics. And we learned a lot. You always learn a lot from the combine. Maybe sometimes you learn too much. Maybe sometimes you fall in love with a track star and then you realize he doesn't know how to play football. But sometimes you also find a DK Metcalf. And every other team in the league apparently doesn't believe what their eyes are telling them when they see him setting combine records in every category pretty much, and decide, we're going to let this guy fall to the second round. We're going to take N'Keal Harry over DK Metcalf.
Right.
And then you find yourself with a DK Metcalf and you're feeling really good about yourself. So let's talk about the combine here. Let's just start with the quarterbacks. Just kind of go in order here. No particular reason why. Just let's start with the quarterbacks. What were some of your big takeaways from the combine work of the quarterbacks this year?
I think from a throwing perspective, CJ Stroud was probably the most impressive. I don't think any guy looked horribly bad. I think that everybody looked pretty good. Obviously, Bryce Young didn't throw within this, and we're looking at the main top guys here. I thought Anthony Richardson looked good on the deep stuff, mixed bag on a little bit like the sideline type throws. It's what you see on tape with him a little bit, which is just he's got the goods as far as the natural delivery and the way he sets up and how everything flows with him, but it just doesn't consistently engage the way you would like to. But then that's something you expect not to see on a guy that's 21 years old, where it's going to take him some time to kind of engage all that through and make it cleaned up a bit. But when it snaps in, you could see on those deep throws, for instance, he can do that stuff all day. I maintain, Brandon, with him, if you just look at him as like, okay, what's my low end on him? What is my reduced end? What is my Jalen Hurts? Like, he can run the read option stuff, every bit is good. And then he's got the deep ball accurately, not just the arm, right, but accurately deep ball to hit the guy up over the top. That shows up on film with him. So he does give you that floor type spot. So I thought he elevated himself, and as much from the drills, Brendan, as much as the throwing. I don't think anybody really did much with their throwing to really push them up or below in any way or another, really. But when it comes to the drills and how he performed in that and the rarefied air he was in with that, I think that definitely elevates his stock as much as any prospect in this draft coming into that combine.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Of course, AR lit the combine on fire. The question is just, do you take that seriously enough to want to spend a top 5 pick on him?
Well, I think it's when you're 99th percentile, we're not talking just good here. We're talking 99th percentile. You saw a guy on the defensive line last year in Trayvon Walker without the production, who was a 99th percentile athlete, which was a part of what caused him to then get taken by Bulky and the Jaguars last year at a different position. I've maintained for a while that from a pure upside potential standpoint, Anthony Richardson in this combine performance kind of shows you it a little bit, has the best pure raw goods of any quarterback in this draft. There are quarterbacks so much more further along, Brendan, in their development and where they are to reaching their ceiling, but he's got the highest ceiling, I think, of anybody else. And it's that this is the tape is not necessarily great, but the tape is not, when you're watching college football, about where they are. It's about where they're going, what they're going to be. Can't get trapped in the flaws you see early on, especially, Brendan, when you're looking at a young player who's not 24 years old, but 21, right? Especially when you're looking at a player who's only got 13 starts under his belt. So, you can't do anything about the fact that he should have gone back to college for another year. That doesn't have anything to do with the fact of where he's going to be in his development long-term. And it's hard to place. It's hard to make a breakdown on that guy, but the combines put him now top 10 assured. And I think top 5 almost. It's getting more and more likely, I think, that he's going top 5 with Seattle trading back if they don't pick him.
I think you're right. I agree. My thing with this quarterback crop is I was looking, like, let's say the Seahawks don't spend their number 5 pick on a quarterback. Let's say they trade back or take a defensive player or whatever. You're not going to get any of the top 4 guys. Those guys are all going top 10 for sure, pretty much. I still think some people really didn't like what Levis did at the combine. I thought he did fine, and I still think he's probably going to be at least a top 8 pick, personally.
Yeah.
And then after those 4 guys, you've got Hendon Hooker, who maybe is a second rounder, maybe is a third rounder. Hard to know. Really hard to know. I was looking for like another guy who you could get maybe in day 3 of the draft who's at least interesting. And I had a hard time with it. Did anybody from the rest of the quarterback crew do anything for you in this combine?
I've got 3 guys, if we're talking day 3, that would stand out to me. The first guy is the guy that I think is the closest representation of Russell Wilson in this draft, and that's Dorian Thompson-Robinson of UCLA.
Yes. Oh, yes.
He's got the arm, he's got the mobility. Undersized. It's kind of to a T like Russ. If you're looking for them to sit to the prototype or guy that, grab a guy, that'd be definitely a guy would not shock me in the least. I think Stenson Bennett, maybe another round later or two than Dorian Robinson, as talking about cheap backup. You're taking a 6th-round guy that could be a cheap backup and be a distributor coming off the bench potentially. I think that's a guy that is maybe interesting to me on that. And beyond that, I would say I guess I would kind of lean to maybe Jake Haener, Fresno State kid, as another third option in there as within
Yeah.
those group.
Doesn't he seem like a quintessential Shanahan quarterback?
Oh yeah, no, he does. It's
Yeah.
I think all these guys kind of fit though a little bit in that pocket. Dorian's a little different because of the mobility stuff, but every guy that you're going to look at as far as a quarterback in this draft, once you get past McKee, is going to be arm strength limited when it comes to pushing the ball 15 plus 20, 25 yards plus up the football field. That's where you start to see that velocity wane. They've got to put a little bit more dip on their rip, and it's just not as good.
Yeah, I actually thought Tanner McKee had a terrible combine. He was really not. His body doesn't look right when he's throwing. It looks like it's something that he hasn't done before.
I think I originally put 4th, 5th-round grade on him, and he's been elevated up. And I don't quite. I guess it's just all about the arm strength with him on him, or that he's from Stanford, so they think he's like super smart with a good arm strength, and they'll, they'll put it together somewhere down the line. But I
Yeah.
don't. I would not want that guy as a prospect on my team as a quarterback. I do not. I think he's a lesser version of Jared Goff, which just doesn't get me really. Jared's fine. I mean, but a lesser version of Jared just doesn't get me excited.
Yeah, it's like how, sometimes you see the 7-foot guys in the NBA, but they move very naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Like they glide, guys like Shaq, guys like Hakeem, the great 7-footers, they don't move like they're freakishly big. They just move naturally. And then you have the guys like Greg Oden who are just like, my legs going this way, my butt's going that way.
Yeah.
I look like a 6-foot guy who just woke up one morning and was 7 feet tall, and I don't really know. Like that's kind of like what I see with Tanner McKee.
Agreed.
His body doesn't look right when he throws.
He just doesn't look athletic, and he just doesn't move. It's the old giraffe on skates, where it's just everything's pitter patter with the feet. The feet aren't in the right spot. Athletically, not in a good position to do something. Get contorted and turned different ways. I was talking to you about this a couple weeks ago. That Washington Stanford tape is just like avert your eyes. If you're walking away from that tape going, "Hey, McKee's a 1st or 2nd round pick," okay, we're seeing 2 different quarterbacks at that point.
Yeah. I didn't really like Max Dugan's combine either. Wasn't that impressed.
No, I thought he's for what he's bringing to the table. He needs to be far more accurate. It's the part of my problem with him. With you've got so much time that you've played in college. You're a former, I think, son of a coach. Why do you miss on so many throws? And it's on his film too, where it's just you're missing on throws you shouldn't miss. And it's not, these aren't like necessarily high difficulty throws, right? Sometimes they're just these little slant route throws or whatnot, out route. And it's just it's not there from an accuracy standpoint. He doesn't have the power arm strength to be that dippy on his accuracy.
So I think that's a look at the quarterback. It's very top heavy, but that's why I say don't rule out the Seahawks using their top pick on a quarterback, because that's where the strength of the draft is, in the top 10. So
Absolutely.
Don't rule it out. All right, so let's how about these running backs? Did anything stand out for you at the running back position at the combine personally?
I've been saying for a while now that I feel like Bijan Robinson is LaDainian Tomlinson 2.0. I feel like his performance at the combine this past week kind of showed that. It's on tape already. The eye test will show you that he looks like him. I know a couple of inches taller than him, but that's not the point. So he almost ran exactly the same 40 time that LaDainian ran back in the day. They had the exact same Brendan, the exact same 10-yard split, the exact same broad jump. They were within a couple of inches of each other as far as their vertical leap is concerned. These guys are mirror images of one another. And it's so when you make these kind of comparisons, sometimes, Brendan, it's like, well, that's the lazy comp to go for this guy if he gets to his upside of this super. No, it's being done in this realm because he's one of those players where there is this comp. There is this active, like, this guy is just like this guy. He runs like he runs. He's got the same moves that LaDainian had. And now you see with his explosive scores and how he moves and how he runs that all backs that up with it. I don't maybe think that it's likely we end up picking this guy, but it stood out to me again that he is a special talent at the running back position.
Yeah, that was a very impressive performance, but I don't see how Seattle ends up with him. They'd have to take him at 5, and I just don't know if I see that.
I don't know if I do either. Probably likely gone in that respect of things. I think the guy that's maybe a potential more likely would be the second kind of running back there on the board, Zach Charbonnet, or depending on where you. I don't know if I've got him second. I got him kind of flipped between a couple guys, but I
I
thought,
think Jameer Gibbs is second on most
yeah,
boards.
Jameer's kind of there with me. It flips probably between, and I've got Gibbs higher on my board right now. But they both give you two different things there, Brendan. Nice thing with Charbonnet, I think, is that he did confirm some of his stuff with what he ran. The downside with him is that you look at him and you on tape he looks 6'2", and you think of him as like this, 2 inches less version of Steven Jackson. That's what you're sort of seeing when you watch him tape. But then he goes out there and measures the combine 6 foot, and you go, oh, he's only at 6. 214, he looks 225, 230 on tape. So, it doesn't tremendously knock him down my board necessarily, or it was a bad combine from him. But that was the thing, is that he is substantially lesser in size than where he was listed at UCLA. And that, I don't know, I guess it wouldn't impact it a ton, but is he going to be able to drive guys? Like, his game is about breaking tackles and moving guys forward. Does he do that at 6'4", 215 at the pro level like he could at the college level? Then maybe a little bit of a question. And maybe he just got down the weight because he was trying to get the 40 down. And so he dropped 10 pounds to get the 4.53.
All right. Now, I got a little something here to consider at the running back position. The thing that got my attention as a Seahawks fan more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
How about Bijan's backup, Roshan Johnson? I want everybody right now to go compare his combine scores to the combine scores of Chris Carson. They are very, very similar. Carson was a little more explosive, but they have the exact same 40 time, the exact same height, the exact same weight, and the exact same 10-yard split.
Yeah, I love Roshan Johnson quite a bit. He is there's 2 running backs in this draft that have the call it the Chris Carson, Marshawn, Seahawk model of running back that they have tended traditionally to alike. He's one of those guys. I think Rodriguez of Kentucky is the other one. And yes, I think he's very similar in his running style to Chris Carson. Gives you that same kind of thing. I think we both acknowledge that the team needs a little bit more of a hammer at the running back position, a guy that can provide some short yardage ability. I do think that he's going to go higher than Carson, because part of the reason Carson did drop was the injury concerns that were there with him. I don't think that the same things there with Johnson. So he probably does go at the highest 3rd round, but you probably have to, maybe he dips into the 4th round a little bit in order to pick him up. But tremendous back, fun runner, tough runner. And there's some good runners in this draft that run pretty hard, but not a lot that run with that sort of tough, just I'm going to drag whoever I got to drag to get those yards kind of guys.
Right. Well, whether or not he goes in the 3rd or 4th, I think depends on how many running backs go ahead of him. And you have guys like Chase Brown, who killed the combine. Chase Brown was probably the running back that did the most to boost his stock at the combine, I think. And he's somebody who was probably moved firmly in front of Roshan Johnson. 4.4340, vertical jump of 40 inches, 25 bench press reps, which was the most of any running back this year. So I think that Chase Brown is probably bumped ahead of him. You've got guys like Devon Achane from Texas A&M. Maybe I wasn't
Arshane's
crazy.
5'9", 188.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's a speed back. He's definitely a speed back, but you got guys like Evan Hull, who had a really good combine. I don't know if he's actually going to go ahead of a guy like Roshan. Probably not, but Evan Hull's been really good at the Senior Bowl and the combine. So it just kind of depends on how many of those guys go ahead of Roshan Johnson and become the appealing option for teams that need a running back. But I think it can happen for sure.
And it's also worth considering that these guys we talk about, even in the case of Brown, I go recheck his tape out, but these 2 guys we talk about in Rodriguez or in this kid, that there are not a lot of backs in this that are this type of back that are like this. A lot of kind of speeder backs and multifaceted backs that can do receiver, running back stuff, but not necessarily the guys that are more of the hammer types. And so that may cause them to be driven up a little bit more. I'm on them in the 4th round. But I do think it's a little bit early in the 3rd round, if that's what you're having to be driven to look at picking him at, which may end up the case.
Did you see Tavion Thomas?
I've watched his tape, yeah.
Yeah, 340-pound running back. I'm sorry, 240-pound.
Yeah.
Ran a 4.7440. Like, he basically could have barrel rolled down the lane probably faster than that.
And
That made me laugh because all these running backs are small, and then out of nowhere, Tavion Thomas off the top rope at 240.
he's like, I'm gonna be different. I'm not trying to be like all these lightweight guys. I'm gonna lean into my girth. And his tape isn't all that great either to me either. Some people are excited by him, but he's kind of top heavy, which means that his legs get taken out from under him a little bit more easier because he's like a boat that's got too much at the top of its stem or whatever, So it's just like.
Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99. I understand about our defensive needs. After this weekend with Combine and Geno news, if Hawks go offense with 4 of the first 5 picks, reaction. What do you think?
Well, as you said at the start of this, with this, Kevin, as Brendan said with this, it's a lot of it's impacted by what we do within free agency, by what is then informed a little bit in the draft. If you went into free agency, this defensive free agency, and you went out and you signed Javon Hargrave and Bobby Wagner, and you just kind of go hog wild with the defense, Clowney, and you just start bringing in a bunch of guys, then you open yourself up to be able to do that if you've got everything covered on the other end of it. It's hard to see them going quite that much, 4 out of 5. I think that they're certainly going to at least be allotting of their first 5 picks, probably 2 to 3, even if they spend the majority of their money in free agency on the defensive side of the ball. But if they're running by a pure best player available approach and letting that guide them, I mean, for instance, at 20 right now, I've run mocks over and over again, Brendan, and mocks where I've tried to kind of a lot where I think teams are going to go to make the 20 selection feel accurate. And I'll tell you, you're looking at, I think, the second best receiver in the draft at that point, potentially in your, you're looking at maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba, looking you down the barrel right there. And so you could be driven that to a couple of the picks, Kevin, but I think on a few of them, they would still then slide back to Dan Henley in the second. If they went Jackson, they'd slide back to Dan Henley in the second round, So I think they will still find their way back to the defense, a good, at least 2, but most likely 3 picks in those first 5.
I feel like if we did this, it would probably mean that we spent a first rounder or at least the early second rounder on a guard. And I'm not a big fan of that because it would either be Torrance or Avila. I'm not a big fan of that. So I don't think I would love it, but it would probably also mean maybe you get Darnell Washington, which I would be pretty into. It might mean that you got, like you said, Jackson Smith, the hyphen man, which, I mean, I'm not crazy about him, but that combine was nice and you saw the appeal.
As long as you just fit him into his role, like, if he's going to be a slot, that's what he is. You commit to the 3 wide receivers at like 60% of the time, so the other 40% will run the 2 tight ends, but you're going to have to commit to that. I don't think it's likely to happen, Brendan. Like there's 2 things with this. Number one, they like their tight ends too much to be barreling out of we like 3 tight ends, much less having to barrel out of the 2 tight end looks in order to accommodate the 3 wide receivers on the football field, because you're only gonna get 1 tight end if you do that. So that already makes it, to me, unlikely they would take the Smith route. The other thing, Brendan, is that when you look at these receivers, you're going to notice this. There's like 7 or 8 receivers from the second round to the 4th round that are just slot guy only. That, okay, I'm not getting Jackson Smith, but am I getting a guy that's functional as a slot at the next level? Josh Downs of UNC, Mims of Oklahoma. Yeah, they're functional out of the slot, and they're going to give me probably pretty close to what I could get with Smith, and I can go to another player because of that a little bit.
All right, so speaking of receivers, let's look at the combine through the lens of a wide receiver hunt. And I understand that the need at wide receiver is a little bit muted right now in Seattle, but we might have a depth issue. And Lockett's getting older. Can't completely rule anything out. So what stood out to you from this particular wide receiver crop at the combine?
It's very slot heavy, first off, as I was just saying, and not just in those rounds, but it's very slot heavy. You have a lot of guys that didn't run particularly fast 40s, that don't have necessarily preeminent size that you would like to look for at the position, and who also have the short arms. There's a pretty defining stat on this in the NFL level about receivers on the outside operating with less than 32-inch long arms, and the amount that actually are having success at the NFL level operating on the outside with less than that length of arm length. And when you look down the line at these guys, Jordan Addison, 30 7/8 inches. We've got Zay Flowers at 29 1/4 arm inches. You talk T-Rex, man. You've got Nathaniel Tank Dell, another guy projected to be a 2nd-round pick at 30.5 inches, coming in at 5.
Isn't he like 120 pounds? Or isn't he like
That's
tiny?
As I was saying, 5'8", 165. I mean, these
Yeah.
guys, Zay Flowers, 5'9", 182. What they did, Brendan, is there's some tricks of the trade on this with the combine. These guys, receiver wise, came in, these undersized guys already at 5'9", and they were like, well, nobody's going to care about my weight. So they just dropped their weight as far as they could to get as fast as their 40 could be, in my opinion. But then you look at their 40 and you go, yeah, but your 40 ain't all that great for as much weight as you had to drop to come in at that size. Zay Flowers, 4'4", Nathaniel Tank Dell, 4'9". You're 5'8", 165, and you're running a 4'9". I got a guy over in Anthony Richardson at 6'4", 215, running 4'3". It's not, those are times that you look at, some of their explosive scores are okay, Brendan, but Jaden Reed, 30.5-inch arms. Keyshawn Boot, 31 and 3/8-inch arms. It's just, that's the thing that kind of stood out to me a little bit. The receiver class, you thought it was underwhelming coming in. It looks underwhelming coming out. I thought the speed scores weren't great. There are some guys that ran fast times that aren't looked at as being really the greatest crop of receivers. Take a guy like Jalen Hyatt, who was thought to be, he's going to be this burner that's going to come in there and he's going to, really just light the world. 4.2, 4, ran a 4.4. Solid. He's got good burst. He'll be a good player at the next level, but he didn't do something to really increase himself that much with the combine performance. And so nobody really jumped forward that mightily, Brendan, in what they did, in my opinion. What you were coming into this is probably more ingrained in what you are. And if anything, there were more guys reduced down in teams looking at them with their capability to play on the outside at the next level and viewing them more as just simply in-slide only kind of slot guys for the most part and how we're going to have to play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mostly agree. It was not a great receiver crop. I did like Marvin Mims. Of the guys who could go in like the top 100, I think Marvin Mims is probably my favorite based off value.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's probably a third round guy at this point. Ran a pretty good 40, pretty explosive with his jumps. 3-cone drill was nice. The catching drills were good. Arms are a little shorter than you would like, but only by like less than half an inch, so I'm not going to freak out about it.
Mm-hmm.
I like Marvin Mims. I would say that would be the top end guy that stands out to me.
I like him a lot too. And I do have a third round grade on him on my horizontal board right now. I've just checked on that. So we're of aligned thinking with that. I do think he did play inside and outside at Oklahoma, but I do see him as really more of an inside guy. He can do a little bit outside stuff. So that's a little bit in his gap bag, but I think his probably, top end is on the inside. His special skill that he did on the top end that you watch on his tape that just stands out to me was his ability to take the top off the defense from the slot. Slot guys don't always have that ability to do that. They're not as much the 9 route runners, but boy, he would skinny post and up, and he would just be killing the slot corners on that because the speed's legit with him. He's running away from guys.
Mm-hmm. I do have 2 late round sleepers, maybe even UDFA sleepers that caught my attention. Bryce Ford Wheaton from West Virginia, the Mountaineers. It's very DK Metcalf-ish. He's big, 6'4", 221 pounds, long arms, 33 and a half, ran a 4.38 40. So one of the best 40s in this class, despite being really big and heavy. Mm-hmm. Vertical jump, 41 inches, tops of the class. Broad jump, 10 feet, 9 inches, really good. And unlike Metcalf, not that now we kind of know this doesn't really matter that much, apparently, the 3-cone drill was actually solid. So freak athlete, not a lot of production in college, sound familiar. You could probably right now get him in the 7th round.
Mm-hmm. At that point, that's anything in the 5th onwards to me, for the most part, is you taking, flyers. And if you're taking flyers on guys that are uberly talented, I mean, this is why Derek Young's looking good this next year. Is this guy from Denore Lenore, didn't have a lot of it wasn't some production with the top end college, but the physical skill set was so different making that you're like, let's take a flyer and see what this guy does. Then he comes in and he does, he's like, wow, he can actually do some stuff here. This is a legit talent now. So why not? You're talking about anywhere 5th, 6th, 7th round for a guy with that, with just even almost those baseline skills alone. You're not getting any guarantees otherwise when you're picking in that spot in the later parts of the draft anyway.
This next guy might be my favorite guy in the whole draft now. It's Andre Yoshivas.
Yes.
Of Princeton. Who else can say they have a Princeton player on their team? Is there another Princeton player in the entire NFL right now?
No, I would say not.
I will be very sad if we don't end up with Yoshivas. 6'3", 205 pounds, 4.43 40. Had pretty good explosive scores. 10-yard split was nice. 3-cone drill was good. I don't know. There's just something fun about this guy, and he's probably going to go undrafted because he's Princeton. So
I think with this draft, because there's so few guys that are fast. I think being a 4.43 in this draft, if you are a fringe guy, that does at least help you to be more in the neighborhood. I have actually done some scouting on this guy. He's a former track guy, so that's accounts for some of that natural speed you get in there with him. He's really stiff.
Yeah.
He's really stiff. He's a body catcher, so he's like a former track guy, right? Like you go, well, the hands thing is a little bit tough with him on that, where he's got the size at 6'3" to be really elongating his catch radius, but it really ends up shorting up because everything's got to be here with his body on it. I thought there was probably a good amount of couple drops that I saw with him out of that because of that a little bit. And yeah, I think he is kind of fringy. I think he'll probably go 6th, 7th round because of his numbers and because people will be a little bit. Fun fact with him is that he reached the highest speed on a football field last year in college football at 22 miles an hour, 22.22 miles per hour last year on a college football field. So, he is also football, not just football field, fast as well with the pads on, so to speak. So you're right to like him. He's not many guys in both these two guys you mentioned, they're toolsy guys. If you're going to get me in the 6th, 7th round, I'm going to grab some toolsy guys. I don't want to go for the, try hard who's never going to see the field because he doesn't have the prerequisite physical ability.
And he went to Princeton, so after football practice is over, he can do your taxes for you, probably.
That's right, or he knows at least a lawyer.
Let's see here. John M429, thank you for the $4.99. Missed the beginning of the show. I know how Brendan feels about it, but Brandon, have you come around to the Geno contract yet?
Yeah, because the more we've learned about it, I was anticipating it was initially $35 million a year with a big amount of bonus money, which was then going to make it nearly impossible in order to lower down the first year or two of the cap hit, which was then going to make it impossible to truly contend because all of your money was going to be wrapped back up into the quarterback contract. Now we're learning that there's these escalators in place where and maybe even beyond that here, to where this now substantially looks like it's lowered down with the first year or two of the cap hit to the Seahawks. And if it's doing that, then I stand up and applaud in every way, John, and say that it's as I say, the thing I always wanted to see the start of this was the blue collar contract, and that's what you've achieved at that point. And then now you have, to me, still the resources, I guess is the word to use, that you can call upon now to truly build a team around Geno. And I think Geno can be, on a blue collar contract, a Super Bowl winning quarterback with these kind of this situation.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is yeah. I mean, it's hard to not like this contract. In order to not like this contract, you must think that Geno Smith is just going to do the Nick Foles thing. You must be convinced that that's all he is, which I think even the people who don't like Geno very much think more of him than that.
Yeah, I would hope so. But I agree with you. There's still maybe some people out there that are on the fringes that are still like, he got lucky last year. And, I see him in my chat at times. So there still is those people that aren't convinced.
Okay, so we talked about the receivers, and we talked about how they didn't run great. They were a little bit slow compared to expectations. Let's talk about a group where there was a little bit more impressive amounts of speed, the tight ends. We saw some tight ends fly. So what stands out to you from this crop?
I think it's interesting when you look at the tight ends in this class because it does kind of, you see where people's kind of what people's opinion, what they look for in a tight end. To me, far and away, Darnell Washington is your number one tight end in this class. Mm-hmm. I think that I thought that coming into this combine anyway, by his upside and the well-roundedness of his game that he gives you. I only think that all that much more coming out of this combine. The guys don't come out built like he's built. He would be awesome on our Seahawks. I would love to have that. I know we don't need a tight end, but he's one of my favorite players in this draft, bar none, regardless of position. And I think that he's got a lot of upside to him as a player. I don't see some guy that's a Kelsey-like pass catcher going forward, but the completeness nature to his game, the fact he could be a de facto 6th lineman for you on the football field at times, there's so much that he comes and he brings to bear. And 6'7", almost 34 plus, 34 and 3/8-inch arms, 4'6", 440, 157, 10 yards, 157, 10-yard split, Brendan. What you thought with him at 6'7", 260 would be like, well, he's going to be really slow out of his stance. He'll just be like, but that's 157. Michael Mayer, who's another guy that we're going to talk about in a second, ran a 166 10-yard split at 6'4", 265. Just to put that in perspective for how fast he gets up to speed and gets up to gear. So to me, I would love to land at somehow, some way Darnell, and he's probably now made himself a late, potential even first round pick at the tight end position.
Yeah. Can you explain the Michael Mayer thing to me? Because he is the universal, no doubt about it, number one tight end on every big board I've ever seen. I don't know why he's supposed to be more desirable than Darnell.
I don't get it either. And we just talked about that 10-yard split. And usually with tight ends, Brendan, the coaches will tell you or scouts will tell you to go to the 10-yard split before you go to the 40 with even tight ends because everything's off the line of scrimmage and most of the routes they're running are quick 10-yard routes. So you want to see that quickness there in it. Mayer didn't have it. He also only did 32 and a half inches as a vert, 118 as a broad, which are not bad numbers, but they're not plus numbers. And then he had only 31 and 5/8 inch arms at the tight end position as far as length. So he doesn't have a tremendous amount of length either that he provides, which is going to inhibit him then when you talk about him as a blocker, which is supposed to be one of his plus elements. So I'd convince you if I cared to. I haven't gotten it with this guy from the start. I think he's a second round guy. I think he's a good all around tight end. But he's a late second round pick, probably early third round pick even. And he's not a guy to me that has enough physical plus ability that you should be picking him at that high in the draft or where his kind of reputation is.
Mhm. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I agree with you about Darnell. He's a lot of fun. I would love to bring him in somehow. I wonder if there's a way to carry four tight ends and then just skimp somewhere else, but it would be hard.
It would be very hard. I think the way you would skimp would be receiver
Yeah.
because then you would just commit to running that tight end sets that often that's you better not get behind in football games. You better not need to go to the four wide receiver
Yeah.
sets or have somebody get injured at that point. So it's a tough bridge to cross on that one, Brendan. I'd love to see it though too with you. I would because this is just a guy to me that there's guys you watch with Georgia. They go, okay, I can see why you win your two national titles. You got this guy doing what he's doing over here, and he's just a part of this team. But that's one of the guys I watched on the tape with him, going, oh my goodness. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you're done if you go out there and you put a 200 one of these light linebackers, Brendan. One of these new age linebackers that's 235, 230, and he's getting to block them at 264, mean, long, and just strong as hell, strong as an ox. Like it's done. It's a wrap. That I don't care how that linebacker is going backwards 20 yards. Say nothing of the safeties or cornerbacks who also might be in his way in that respect. So it's just he is a dominating blocker beyond whatever he gives you as a pass catcher, which in itself is still substantial. It's tape so much fun to watch.
Right. Another guy who started the combine at the tight end position was Zach Kuntz, Old Dominion tight end. Big dude and also a very fast dude, 6'7", 255 pounds. So he's actually the same height as Darnell, but he ran a 4.55 40. He also had good jump scores. He also bench pressed 23 reps. Like he was kind of a combine warrior here. So how do you feel about him?
Old Dominion, so it's hard to find much tape on Old Dominion for me online. I have to kind of just scrouch and search.
You got to go to the games.
You
The
got to go to the
camcorder.
game. I know exactly. You can sense he moves better than a guy for his size. So when you see the 4.5 stuff, it's not just workout stuff. He looks like he moves. 6'7" guys will tend to be those guys. There's even a couple in this that are just they're very much in the Frankenstein. They just get to that too big a size, like you said, a little bit like the basketball players are walking on stilts a little bit. But he's actually pretty smooth and big for a guy his size, and he can high point the ball pretty well. But I didn't get a chance to really find much tape on him too much. So I'll probably have to do a little bit more digging on him to see what he is and where he is. But the scores were impressive. 157, 10-yard split. That's great for a guy 6'10", 6'7", 255. It's good stuff. He moves well.
Yeah, the other tight end that did good at the combine was Will Mallory, but he's more of a kind of a, I guess you could call him a Jacob Hollister, smaller guy, lighter
H-back.
guy. Yeah. 4.5440 was tops of all tight ends. The rest of the scores are okay, but he's just more of a H-back. I don't see a ton of interest there.
Yeah, I think the bottom line on the tight ends this year is absent perhaps maybe the guys you just mentioned, and then Washington. It's a group that you really probably more want to turn on the tape with, and that that's where they show up on their plus side. It isn't they're not going to test, but they look good on tape. There's a lot of guys that look really solid on tape.
Right. I actually looked it up. Greg Olson's 10-yard split was actually pretty bad at the combine too. Maybe that's what, and I think Jason Witten's was as well. Maybe that's what they see when they see players like Michael Mayer, because it's seems kind of clear to me he's following in the footsteps of guys like Greg Olson and Jason Witten. So maybe they, for some reason, just don't think that 10-yard split matters.
Well, that was going to be my Dalton Kincaid comp in this
Mm.
draft is Jason Witten.
Mhm.
That's what
Oh,
I was going to. So I've got a guy in this draft like that too. But you're on the button with it. It's where I see it
okay.
as well. And I get it's usually like their route running. Like Dalton's got the hands with Michael Mayer. It's the route running for a guy 264. Like he runs really really good routes, but there's no suddenness to them. There's no explosiveness to them. It's just that he's very good about body control and getting to the stem of the route, and especially gets to the stem of the route. Remember that's what Witten used to do, is he'd go straight up and he got to the stem of the route and he just had the knock and he'd be able to run the option routes a lot of times. So he just sensed the leverage and then off Romo, he'd turn in off the leverage. So if leverage is inside, he's going this way, leverage is that way, he's going that way. This guy can do the kind of same thing where he would just go up and feel and then you couldn't tell which way he showed no kind of hand on which way he's going, which is kind of a receiver kind of trait you have to be able to just go full. But that's about it. But,
Yeah. I mean, well, with a name like that, he's definitely going to be good in the NFL. There's no way that Dalton Kincaid will not be a good NFL player.
I agree. It's an NFL name pure right there.
Mm-hmm. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. Who should we draft at 5 and why? And how can we get better right now? Maybe even finally beating the 49ers better. I want to beat the 49ers. Well, a couple different things to unpack here. Who should we draft at 5 and why? And how can we get better right now? So if you're talking about getting better right now, you're probably not talking about taking a quarterback. So where are you with the Jalen Carter stuff right now because of the legal things surrounding that? How do you feel about it at the moment?
I'm not out on him as of yet. My bottom line on this has been, I've done some research on this where I've heard varying levels of whether or not this is absolutely an indication of something or not. I know that there's other things that went along to this whole story of the misdemeanor charges being brought up. But I do look at kind of the full pictures. I sort of stand back from it and I go, okay, I'm going to trust in John Schneider, the private investigators, the scouts, the people that they have doing their due diligence with Georgia and the program there to get a read on who this kid and where this kid is at. And wherever they land on that, if they were to select Jalen Carter, I'm not going to be one of those people clutching for my pearls, Brendan, talking about how this is just the worst kind of moral decision you ever make to draft a guy like this. I have yet to really see something that truly at this point, I've heard rumors, I've heard some innuendos, but we've got a racing charge and I don't have a lot else. I wouldn't at this point. I wouldn't be out unless I heard. The one way I would be out on this, Brendan, is if I'm John Schneider and my guys come back, my PI sits down across from me and he says, you know what? This is the tip of the iceberg. This whole misdemeanor thing, if you even knew what was covered up by that program with this kid, let me tell you. Okay, I'm out at that point. But if to deal with the B Combs question and the way that what's the guy the best? Give me the best player. Give me the player who's going to come in and be most impactful at number 5. And no player is going to come in to be more impactful, in my opinion, at number 5 than Jalen Carter. And I still do reside there.
For me personally, I'm just trying to look at it objectively. And I'm like, okay, drunk driving, reckless driving because he was racing.
Mm-hmm.
There's being involved in something that ended in a death. He fled the scene and he lied to the police. You put all that stuff together and forget about the morality of it for a second. There's like he could very realistically spend a year in prison, I think.
Well, he's only been charged with misdemeanor at this point. So he's not been charged with lying to the police. This is okay, so he's changed the story to the police, but the police have not charged him with lying to the police. He's not charged with that. And I think it's important to not expand beyond what it is he has been charged with. He's not charged with manslaughter, murder in the race. That somebody did die. It's unfortunate. I'm not trying to discount somebody passing on, but I also think that there's a lot of this probably goes on at the college level in a variety of places. Young kids make stupid mistakes. It doesn't mean it's exactly emblematic of who he is as a player and a person that this situation happened. If I'm not mistaken as well, Brendan, he's drunk. Well, they just came off the national title game, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's celebrating. So was it some not unusual? It's kind of an unusual occasion where everybody's going a little bit harder on it. Some of the conditions you talk about the lying and stuff. It's like what I've come back to on this is this thing about the situation. If it is a lies, and again, not being charged with it is you have a kid with his whole future ahead of him. And if he makes that decision to stay there and do that, and he's looking at probably probably not sober of mind at that point, thinking clearly, right? And so not thinking clearly, he makes a bad choice. And not thinking clearly, he's thinking about, man, is my future about to go in the toilet if I sit here and just, or should I go home first and get my head right? And I'm not saying it makes it okay, but I can understand a little bit of where he's at from a mental standpoint on that and how that broke down. And I just don't as quickly go to the place of saying, I get it though, to the people that do, Brendan. So I'm not saying I'm pushing like, oh, you shouldn't be touching. I get the people that say, no, there's other players that I don't have to have this question in my mind. If we select them there, I'm going to go with them instead. I like these guys' upside as it is. This is just where I personally land with it. And part of it's informed by the fact that I truly believe he's the best defensive player, nay, the best player entirely in this NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, my issue with it is he can still be charged with this stuff just because he hasn't been charged yet. Like you could draft him and then he gets charged after you draft him. Like that's very possible. That's my concern here. I really don't want to spend the number 5 pick on a guy who spends his first year in prison.
It's why I say I think to do beyond all what you and I do as far as conjecture on this, the amount of background work being done by John Schneider and the Seahawks, because it is the 5th pick. This isn't Malik McDowell. This is the 5th overall selection in the draft. You're not just sort of bypassing over and taking a look at the kid with sort of a side glance. They're going to do the deep dive on this kid. And whatever they come out of, Brendan, if they come out of this where they pick the kid, I'm going to take it for granted that that due diligence has come out, that this is not the tip of the iceberg, that this indeed was an outlier of a situation and it's a bad situation and doesn't look good, but it's not who he is. It's not what he was with that program. And if that's the case, then I'm a little more open to it, but I'm going to trust in their assessment above all. And if they pass on him, even though I love him as much as I do, on the shoe on the other foot here, Brendan, they do pass on him. As much as I love him as I do, I'm not going to be squawking here about the fact that they made the worst mistake ever by passing on him. Like I said, it will be completely understandable that you say, no, we don't want that risk. There's too much smoke around this fire here for us to pull that and go.
Yeah. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult, but I do agree with your sentiment though that it shouldn't be. You shouldn't completely make the decision based purely off like morality. Like there should be some Machiavellian element to it. It's like, okay, can he help us win or not? And he's not going to be able to help us to win if he's in prison. But if he isn't in prison, if he doesn't get charged, he can help us win. Therefore, I completely get that. I'm definitely with that. But my question is, does he get charged? Just no way to know right now.
Yeah, I don't see the, and look, we've talked about the Georgia police being a little bit weird with some of the people like Tamari and Terry in recent history and playing some of this game. The timing of this, I think, was playing a little bit of game by the Georgia police on their part with this. I would be on a high profile guy like this within that state. I think there's some strings probably being pulled around in the background on this that will come to find in this. This isn't just some everyday player that's rolling out like this. So we'll see where it goes down. And he may be. I would wonder though, Brendan, why again this incident already happened a long time ago. So now you've come out with new charges that you brought now, and you go, okay, we're now going to do these charges. Now you're going to wait another year in the process on this kid just to screw over his career instead of charging him the charges now. That feels sort of punitive rather than you really seeking out justice at that point, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. But that is something that happens, like it happened with Tamori and Terry. That. Just because I
hold on though.
It would be unfair.
Tamari and Terry got charged with the deal, but there weren't extra charges than that were put on top of it. He just got charged about like what happened here with Carter, essentially on these charges coming to bloom with the misdemeanor. That did happen with Terry, but it wasn't that Terry got those charges and then they waited a year and threw an extra charges. What happened was the justice system dragged their feet over a 2-year period with Terry, screwing over his NFL career and making that whole process take a tremendous amount of time. And he was a fringe NFL prospect, so there wasn't a team that was going to bet on him or be willing to, wait that out in that time period for him to get a clean, bill of health, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. There's a lot to balance here. And the thing is, kind of like with Deshaun Watson last year, the team is going to have access to investigators and information that we as fans don't have. So it's really hard for us to judge this situation the way this team will be able to. So it's really
100%.
hard to know.
Yeah. And we'll trust in it. I'll trust wherever they go. And I hope Hawk fans too will. If they do, if it's a risk that at the end of the day, understand you're getting the best player in the draft at 5 if you do pick him. Wherever you sit as far as his character standpoint, let's just take that out the door for a second. You're getting the best entire player in the draft at number 5 if you select him.
Lazy, thank you for the $1.99. If we draft Darnell, would moving Fant to wide receiver work? I don't think you can move him to receiver. You could play him in the slot more, maybe.
This is really if you draft Darnell Washington to me, lazy, I think it's a deal that comes in combination with a moving of Fant. And there's a couple reasons you do this. You draft Darnell Washington, who I believe is an overall upgrade to Fant and what he provides you as a player. But then you're saving, what is it, Brendan, $6.85 million on the salary cap this year. So you also then save that by moving on from Fant. Darnell would take a little bit of that up, but you still save cumulatively, what, $6 million.
Yeah.
And then you also probably pick up a fourth or fifth round pick in addition to moving Fant at that point, a player that you're not going to after this year probably intend to put on a multi-year contract. And if that's the case, why not get out ahead of that, get some value back, clear the space off the book so you can spend a little bit more money in free agency, especially again if the bottom line is you end up upgrading the position.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I have definitely played with the idea of trading Noah Fant. In both scenarios, by the way, because even if you were planning to be patient in 2023, why would you keep Fant? Because he's only going to be here in 2023. Why not get something for him now? So I think the move Fant scenario works both ways. And I do think you could probably get like a fourth round pick for him, which is something. You know, you find good players in the fourth round pretty frequently.
Absolutely. Or you could do something else with this, Brendan. If you pick that fourth round pick up, is you take the fourth and you take your 2 5s and you get yourself up and back into the top of the third for one more hit at that tier 2 group if you want. So there's some potential in there with that as well if you make that kind of move.
Yeah. I do think it's possible that you have 4 tight ends and you have Fant playing the slot more because he's capable of it physically, but I don't think it's as likely as the trade scenario you have presented.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, they could look at doing that. We're going to go big, and hey, I mean, he gives you a good blocker there for the slot. Then, and I mean, it's maybe they showed a lot of creativity last year with the 3 tight ends. Who's to say that that creativity doesn't continue and expand?
Mm-hmm. Okay, back to the combine here. Let's take a look at the offensive line here, and I think we can safely kind of bypass a lot of the guys here because we don't need a tackle at all. We
No.
have 4 tackles, all on rookie deals, all doing their job perfectly adequately. Maybe not Stone Forsyth, but even then, he's a backup left tackle, and it's a very small sample size we've seen him. I don't think we can draw any conclusions there yet. So we're mainly focusing on center, and then there's a little bit of guard as well. So, what did you take away from this combine from the offensive linemen?
I mean, nobody really blew me away too much down the line. Even the top line guys like your Osiris Torrance, 5'3", 140, 184, 10-yard split. Just to kind of put a bottom line on it with the guards and the centers out of this draft. Even a guy like the center we're looking
It's
at, Schmitz, underwhelming.
yeah,
Not a good draft. Not what you would like to have seen. I mean, he could have elevated himself into first round discussion, and I think indeed he probably dropped himself down into more mid 2 now in where he is going to lie. But I can't really say that there was anybody that really jumped out as some big point to me on this. I was just kind of I think the center cross is still fine in that I didn't expect them to test out really well. I've been saying to you that there's not a lot of scheme fits in the center class. They're good centers per se, right? They're good players, but they're not necessarily the pure mover fits that we want to necessarily look for. So there wasn't a lot of guys to me that bumped out on this that were really like, oh, this guy really, hey, here we go. Even a guy like Cody Mock, was like, well, he tested okay. I was expecting him to be more of an upper level tester, being a small school guy and what you're hoping to see, and it was okay. So it's okay group this year. It's not super. The center class is a little deeper than the guard class, but the guard class is one of the weaker positional groups in this whole draft and combine to me. What do you think?
yeah, I was really disappointed in Schmitz. I thought that if he had a good combine, he would actually be able to move himself up into the first. I feel like he actually pushed himself down, maybe even in the second half of the second. Like, I didn't get a very good feeling from him. So he's still the best center in this class, but I'm now wondering, would I rather take a Whippler in the third? And Whippler, I thought, had a pretty good combine. He probably had the best combine of any center.
Mm-hmm.
Decent 40-yard dash, pretty decent athletic scores, 29 bench press reps, which was actually close to the top of the non-Voorhees offensive lineman. So Whippler, I think, did himself some favors. I would also say Stromberg had a good combine, although he's pretty slow, which is not what we're looking for necessarily. But I thought Stromberg had a good combine overall. So that's mainly what I took away from it. And Oluwatimi was okay, not great. There were some things he did well in, some things he didn't do so well in. So there's definitely no Linderbaum here. I agree.
I was hoping Oluwatimi was going to come in and really be a guy that shines because his tape is really good with the mobile stuff. And if that showed you that on the, then you felt really good about grabbing him, um, you know, third round range. But he'll still be a target potentially for our Hawks because of his scheme fit.
Yeah, at the end of the day, some of these guys are just going to be football players. They're not going to test great. Like John Michael Schmidt's incredibly consistent over his career in Minnesota on a football field. So should we get that wrapped up in his testing scores? Probably not.
No, I think with the guys you feel good about the tape on that you see, like a Schmitz, the combine doesn't inform you to ding them necessarily too harshly. It might drop them down a little bit from you where you go, okay, the potential's maybe a little reduced from his upside, but I know at least he comes in with the high floor. It should more about the guys who have the flash on a number that you're like, whoa, I didn't see this. Let me go back to the tape. I had maybe painted this guy into a bad corner or not into his corner that has him as a brighter prospect that he should be. And that's what that should really, as much to me, inform you on as much as anything else, or confirm things that you already were kind of seeing on tape.
A couple sleepers here, I guess, would be a John Gaines II from UCLA, most athletic guard in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
5-second flat 40 time, 1.73 10-yard split as a 305-pound guy.
What was his arm length?
33.58, 33 and 5/8.
Made himself some money.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys will like that in this draft.
So that's like a reserve guard sleeper. And we do need reserve guards, by the way, because I think right now we have 2 guards on the roster, Haynes and Lewis.
Island, and depending on where they see him.
Mm-hmm. And he'll probably start the season on the practice squad. I don't think we want to keep him on the 53-man because he hasn't shown anything yet. But yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree.
Sidney So from Eastern Michigan actually had really good athletic scores for a guy who's like 325, 5.0740, jumped fairly well for a guy of that size. Nothing over the top, probably still like a 7th rounder at best, but intriguing late round sleeper. I think that in a crop like this, where you're not that impressed with the top end guys, you want to find the late round sleepers.
Agreed. Yeah, you're just going to try to hopefully you can round out the depth. I wouldn't be surprised though, to your point, like we do need 2 guards. So they come out of this draft with 2 guards. It wouldn't shock me, especially with the free agent class being as thin as it is for guards.
Let's see here. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5. Which one of our assistants can become a future head coach, RDC or OC? What coaching assistant has the most potential? Yeah, this one's kind of interesting. Let's see here. What do you how do you see this right now? Because a lot of people thought Desai was the head coach in waiting. That's not happening now.
Yeah. I don't think any coach on this roster as of yet, Be Calm, has put themselves in a position to seemingly be clear as far as a future head coaching possibility. I know Clint Hurd has expressed that he wants to eventually become a head coach. I think Waldron's probably done the most impressive work. When you look at him last year, taking Geno as he did, having 2 rookies starting as he did on the edges, and getting the production out of that offense that he did, that certainly, I think, makes his star the brightest of any guy in the coaching staff for the potential of being, a head coach. But, you're probably looking like some of these guys taking, like David Canelli's this offseason. Some of these guys have been plucked off the deal here right now as it is. So there's just not, I think, as many guys out there. But I guess Waldron, if I was to be pressed for an answer.
Kind of feel like Waldron is going to be like a Hackett, Nathaniel Hackett, where he's a good coordinator, but he doesn't have the it to be a head coach. There's a little some extra. Yeah.
That's why I say I don't think, and I don't want to dodge Be Calm's question, but I just don't think that there's really a guy yet that has emerged here on this coaching roster of being a guy that just, wow, this is a star in the rise. This is a guy that's going to be the next, bump. I just haven't quite seen it yet.
Right. And, hiring outside of your organization when it comes time to get a coach is often a good thing.
It can help Brendan as opposed to 100% of the time going in-house. So yeah, I'm a little bit in favor of that as well, Brendan. It's one place I'd like to see the team try to adjust themselves a bit. So let's do a little more outside hiring. Look for a little bit more of the outside talent.
Okay. So that was the offense. I think that was a pretty good wrap-up of what caught our attention on offense at the Combine. Let's flip over to the defense now, starting with maybe the most impressive crop of players in this class, the edges, the edge rushers. And we'll kind of roll the guys who might be edges in the NFL, but might be a little too big. We don't really know
Mhm.
yet. Guys like Adebawore, who are 280 pounds, but move well enough to be an edge. We'll roll
Mhm.
those guys in there as well. So, what do you think of this crop?
Well, obviously, I think Nolan Smith did the best work of anybody as far as improving his stock with this combine. 6'2", 238, 4.39, 40, 1.52 10-yard split, which is elite. 41.5-inch vertical leap, almost 130-inch broad jump, and he's just a hair short of 33-inch long arms. So you look at those scores from him, and that is very elite. You also understand coming in, he's one of the better edge run defenders in this class. So posting these kind of twitchy scores to go in addition with knowing you're just out there, when you open out the box with Nolan Smith, you're getting the best run defender just off the jump in this draft as far as an edge player goes. So he has a lot of upside to go in addition to that, is kind of what I'm saying with that. And then, Brendan, with these Georgia defensive linemen, man, they've got that scheme that just does so much blitzing, and it asks those guys to do dirty work stuff even on the edges. And this was what caused Trayvon Walker to go up into the first round last year and be the number 1 overall pick. He didn't have the production to do so, but people were looking and going, well, he's playing 5-tech a lot of the time. He's not ever out really wide, just going. He's sometimes just kind of maintaining the block or kind of playing a spy roll on the backside against the quarterback. They'll do that, Brendan, where, like the backside edge rusher will sort of just keep his depth off the snap and then just hold the block. And he's waiting to do the loop move where if the quarterback goes back door on the pocket, he just kind of loops back around over there. But it looks like he's lost the rep, right? When you watch the tape on those kind of plays, but he hasn't lost the rep. He's just doing his job. So I think Smith really did help himself out, substantially. Adewari did as well. He's such a weird player, Brendan, because
I
the tape,
know.
he's such a strange guy. I like him, but God, he's weird. It gets weird with Adewari. I thought Will McDonald did pretty good. Van Ness to me is a little bit of a mixed bag with him because the 4.58 40 is great, but then you look at the 1.64 10-yard split, the 31-inch vert, and the 118-inch broad jump, which then confirms for me, again, you talk about confirming tape with me, Brendan, Nucleus Van Ness, you go, oh, I'm worried about the first step quickness. I don't see bend and I don't see first step quickness. I harp on this. It's like quarterback without arm strength. If I have a pass rusher without first step quickness and bend, he can still win. He can still get sacks, but he's kind of missing some base tenets within his game that you kind of want. And so now that's confirmed with a 1.64 and a 31 and a 118 broad. There's not that explosiveness with him. He's a try hard, high motor kind of guy that's going to, occupy blockers and then just try to stack and shed guys pretty much.
Yeah, not great on the bench press either. I don't know if you care about bench press numbers for these guys, but 17 reps is not very good for a try hard guy.
No, I think I'll give him a little bit of room, but then even I think your point still stands up because this didn't inhibit guys like Zach Harrison who have insane long arms and they still posted great bunch numbers. He does have 34-inch long arms, so he's above the 33 by another inch past what you want as a prerequisite. So legitimately long arms with Van Ness, and when you have the longer arm guys, they have to go longer down on that bench. It's like you're going a couple inches more further. You got to push and draw the weight for some of those stubby arms guys that might be 31, 32-inch long arms that you can't do that as much. But he's still, to me, Brendan, a guy that I know a lot of people do like a lot, but I still at the end of the day just go, I don't quite see the appeal fully with this guy. I can see a high floor, but I'm kind of more a ceiling guy when it comes to picking where you're going to pick him as high as you're going to be selecting him.
Yeah. Did you notice Byron Young, the edge out of Tennessee out there? Because I noticed this because way back about a month ago, Mel Kiper did his first mock draft and gave us Byron Young at 20. And I was like, that's ridiculous. There's no way he's going to be a good pick at 20. But he had a really nice combine, so maybe it's not as ridiculous as I thought.
No, he had a very solid combine, and the tape matches this up. He's got a lead change of direction, Brendan. So he does sort of what would be a crossover move, especially on offensive tackles. That's not where he's setting him up like he's leaning to one way and come back. That he's just a snap. He'll snap on his change of direction so quick, which is hard to test for. Just that's what you see with him on tape. But then he does have the explosiveness. He does have the dip and bend, the thing that we just talked about with Van Ness that he is missing. That's something this guy does actually show on tape and what he has, in his bag. He's a little undersized at 6'2", but he carried 250 at 443 on the 40. So he does at least have the prerequisite weight there that you would look for and like. a lot in that guy's bag as far as a player, Brennan. He's not a one-trick pony type. He's not just a guy who gives you just one thing. He's got a lot of different things he can kind of call upon as an edge player that I think are very interesting. I've got him as a second-round guy at this point, so I still think Kuiper's 20 overall was a little high for him at that point. But nonetheless, second round.
Yeah. What do you think of Foskey? He's a guy who I've had a really hard time figuring out. I had him mocked to us at like 37 in a mock draft I did a month ago. Everyone hated it. They were like, that's a fourth round guy at best. And I was like, I'm not seeing it. This combine was okay. What do you think of him?
Production there is outstanding with him. It's not to be denied. Last 2 seasons Notre Dame, he's been the guy for them, and he looks edgy, and he's got first step quickness that really stands out. That looks elite on tape, but he's had a miserable postseason as far as testing goes. He was awful. I think the worst run defender at the Senior Bowl by reports. Just didn't do much as a pass rusher either. Now you have a little bit of a middling combine. I do indeed think that his stock, for me, as much as any player from the post college season to the now process we're at here, from where I saw them there to where I see them here now, he's dropped the furthest, and indeed is now, in my view, a late third to probably early fourth round prospect at this point.
I can think of one edge player that's done worse to his stock than Foskey. It's Andre Carter.
Yep, that's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Carter is firmly implanted for me now, probably fourth, fifth round range.
He might go undrafted if this keeps up, man. He did 11 bench press reps after testing slow.
It's possible. It's possible he could dip even further, and he's been diving down my board faster and faster. So look, it's the 1 year wonder thing is a real thing in college, where guys can have a 1 year of production, and it's why you like multiple years of production. And if you see a year where here comes the one good year of production, and the next year it's not anywhere close, that should raise warning bells if there's not some injury excuse reason to give, especially when it's a guy like Carter that's playing at Army against lesser competition. He should be dominating,
Yeah. Yeah, you could go to Planet Fitness right now. I could drive there right now and probably find somebody who can do 11 bench press reps at 225.
No, he's 260 too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, you've got to, that stuff is, the bench press reps aren't necessarily indicators of like your pure power and strength. They're indicators of work ethic and whether or not you're willing to put in the work to get yourself in the right shape, and that you'll be a pro and work hard. And I'm sure Andre is going to be coming out of Army and all that. He'll be a good pro and all that, but you're right, man. His stock is dipping, dropping, falling. It's not looking good. Both him and Foskey have been in that same realm, just where it's slide, like the guys trying to put their feet into the ground and they just keep sliding backwards.
Nick Moonman, thank you for the $2. Would you prefer Nolan Smith over Tyree Wilson? Huh.
Floor over ceiling, Brendan. Which do you prefer? Floor over ceiling.
Well, the thing is, what is Tyree Wilson going to be in the NFL? Because I don't really like him that much as an edge. I think he's got no explosion. He's kind of more of a. I look at him and I kind of think he should play on the interior almost, but he's 275. Like, is he just going to be an undersized 3 tech, an oversized 5 tech?
I have a little more confidence because with Texas Tech, he's rushing off the edge, he's standing up, and he's got familiarity with it. I think that the points about him that you make about him being quick enough and having not necessarily some of that snappiness that you look for off the edge, that's going to be missing on him. But if you're running him strong side of the formation, Brennan, where you have Tyree Wilson as your 9 technique strong side defender, and he's got the tight end right there. You're talking about a guy can now eliminate both the tight end and a tackle there on the edge and allow your players to run free. You're talking about as well, you're not as worried as much necessarily about the fact he's not as twitchy and bendy because he's not your blind side guy. He's your power guy on that side when he's coming. So I think that when it comes to Nolan Smith, even with Nolan Smith's incredible 40 time, I don't think Nolan's ever going to be a guy that comes out to the NFL level and turns into a guy that's getting 13 sacks a year and upper level run defender. I think he'll be a good run defender that gets you 7 to 8 sacks a year. And that's what he is. And he probably gets you that pretty quickly. Like he probably arrives at that pretty fast. But with a guy like Tyree Wilson, to me, you have a guy that's a more of that 13, 14 sack year potential, who also is a good run defender if he can reach his ceiling. That's the question, though. Can he reach it, Brendan? I don't know on that. I know where Nolan is. That's why I want you to say where you go with this, because it's a tough question.
Yeah, I think I'm Tyree. But I would have liked to have seen him do a little bit more at the combine because I don't trust those pro days,
Rightfully so. Pro days are a little bit suspect, and you like that. You like that clinical. Like everybody's on the same footing here at Indianapolis when these guys are being tested. So, Nick, it's a fantastic question on your part. It comes down to one to me of what do you prefer more in your prospects, a high floor or a high ceiling? Both me and Brendan lean towards more of the high ceiling, especially if we're picking low in the draft.
The snail, thank you for the $2. Diane Henley must become a Seahawk. I've been hearing this a lot lately.
Yeah, I ran a mock yesterday. I've run on last couple mocks that I've run. Henley has been the guy for me in the second round. I think with this combine performance, we'll talk about the linebackers in a second, but I think he has elevated himself to that spot now with this combine performance. Just to me, it just feels right that if we just sit with our native picks in the second round and we come away with Deion Henley and John Michael Schmitz, it just feels like a psychic inclination I have that feels like a perfect marrying of picks to the picks to the places, and to the needs, and that you're not reaching for need with either of those two guys, Brendan. You're walking away with maybe one of the best middle linebackers in this draft, maybe the best center in this draft, then in the second round, not in the first, in the second round. That would be great value, great picks. These are high floor players with actually having some ceiling involved with them as well, as we're talking ceiling floor. I would love it, Snail. Love it.
Yeah, I'm for it as well. It's not a great linebacker crop. Henley is moving up that linebacker board pretty quickly here, I think. Every time I look at something about Henley, it's always about how good he is in coverage, which is big to me. I keep thinking about that Super Bowl where the Eagles have one of the best defenses in the league. It's so deep, it's unstoppable. Nobody can touch it. And they're just completely helpless against Travis Kelce because the league, in many ways, hasn't really figured out how to cover these tight ends yet. So you've got to start figuring out some way to cover these tight ends.
You do. It's hard to find, as we've seen with Jordan Brooks. You have to you look at these middle linebacker prospects and you end up having to kind of pick one thing, but not to have the other. Brooks, I get the run defender, but then I don't get anything in coverage. And it's very hard to find the guys that can give you little flashes of both, like Cody Barton, that can still stay consistent when they show you some of those flashes. With this guy, he does give you both. He can be a great run defender, and he's got the coverage skills. He's a former safety convert, so the coverage skills make sense. And he's got the size you look for. He ran fast. I mean, he checks every box you kind of want for the modern middle linebacker. My comp for him as I've gone through this process, Brendan, is Levante David, who also went in the second round back in the day. So I think it's a pretty clear comp. If I can get Levante David in the second round, a young Levante David type, hell yeah.
Okay. So that's the summary of the situation with the defensive ends. Let's look at the interior linemen, the tackles, defensive tackles. There was some really interesting stuff from the testing here, but what stands out to you?
Obviously, Cansey's the first thing that I think jumps at me first and foremost. He sets the combine record for the fastest 40 for a defensive tackle in the last 20 years. And he's a great, it's one thing I wanted to ask you about. It's like, I think it's the great question right now that kind of emerges within this draft, because if you do move back, let's say with Carolina, and you do a trade so they get their quarterback and you move back with them and maybe move back even further. Well, now very much, let's say Tyree's off the board at that point. Kancey could be the guy you're looking at there as a potential likely target for the Hawks and how they view him. And for me, the bottom line on Kancey's come down to this. And I want your answer on this and where you stand with this. Do I feel like with Kancey, watching his tape and where I stand with him, that because he's missing some of the power of Donald and then he's missing 2 inches of arm length, that he can't be close, not to Donald and Hall of Fame stuff, but that be an upper level player, an upper level kind of a force worthy of the pick that you'd be making at 12 or 13 if you move back to where you selected him at that point. And for me, I come back to say, no, that stuff, I'm usually anti the short stuff, but he's so close to the mark on Donald and so many other places that I'm not dissuaded myself. But I'd love to know where you stand on that, because that arm length thing stands out with him, doesn't it?
Yeah, I actually did a mock draft this morning. I posted it on my channel where I traded down to 11 with Tennessee and got Kancey at 11. So I'm for it. I'm for it. At number 9, I do think it's a little bit different. I like it a little bit less, but it's very similar. I wouldn't be against it then. I think that obviously he didn't do anything at the combine except run. That was all he did. He didn't do any lifting. Like, I would have been interested to see how he does on the bench because his arms are so short and he's so, strong for somebody his size, would he have been able to just crush the bench press and do like 45? That would have been cool to see. But I think I would go for it. I think there's enough upside here for me to be okay with the downside.
Yeah, I do too. And I just feel like his quickness, he is insanely quick. He's not quick, he's insanely quick from the inside. And I feel like with that arm length stuff, a lot of it comes down to you got guys that are fairly close to how quick they get out of their stance and get off being a tackle or defensive tackle and an offensive lineman. But with him, because he is so differently sudden, he's going to get past that arm length, kind of like, like Mike Tyson with getting past the long arms of guys back in the 80s, with his, you're so quick getting right up into their kind of grill. They don't have that opportunity to get the arms out and get the punch on you first. You're to them too quick, and I think he's going to create those situations at the NFL level. And then you just, try to work him, you might have to work him a little bit as more of a just de facto pass rusher at first until you can get his footing with it. But we've seen Donald in this defense work, Brendan, in this same defense work as a defensive end. And these guys are this close in size wise to each other.
Yeah. I actually need to go later and compare their combine scores and see how similar they are in terms of measurements. I think they're probably going to be very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But Cansey was the star. Brian Brisee also did well, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. I think he did. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
it's good.
Legit 300 pounds, ran a 4.8 640.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty nice, pretty good. If you could get, how do you feel about Brisee at 20 right now?
I'd be okay with it. I trust in the fact he's going to return back to 2021 form. The 2022 tape ain't there with him, but the 2021 tape, if you turned on highlights of him in 2021, you go, okay, that's a top 15 pick. And I think that this year coming that fast removed off a torn ACL probably wasn't at 100% at any point in time. And I think these testing scores show that he's starting to get more rounded back into that physical elite place that he was as he initially burst on the scene there at Clemson.
Right. All right. Anything else stand out to you from the more lower areas of the draft in the first round?
I think Keanu Benton had a really good combine. I think he was a guy I think he's going to be right there in that second round potential range, a guy that could be a Seahawk target with his zero tech abilities. He was good, I think, all the way down through 33 and 7/8 long inch arms too, to go with that. You really like that for a guy that's going to be your point of attack guy down in the middle down there. Saika Ika is a guy you get talked about. I know that gets asked to you probably a lot about in your chat. I thought he had a really underwhelming combine, and you've got to dip that guy down the boards at this point in your view of him. Short arms. His arms are actually longer than I thought, 32 and 3/8 inch. I thought he was going to come in at 31, legit, because that's what it looks like on tape. The guy looks like he loses his opposite of go-go gadget arms. Like they go. Gervon Dexter, 1-8-1 10-yard split. Brendan, remember I said slowest guy off the line of scrimmage?
Yeah.
1-8-1 10-yard. You can go, well, he's 312 pounds. Well, yeah. No. He doesn't get off the line of scrimmage, and he's supposed to be a pass rusher extraordinaire. Give me, it's, I don't see it. I know you're probably wanting one guys that, sound better here. You got your Jalen Redmond, who's a good one. He posted a good time, 6'2", 291, little lighter, more of your 3 techie type guy, but I thought that was pretty good.
I liked him too. Yeah.
Yeah. He was okay on that. Dante Stills, West Virginia, I think, had some pretty good times from where he came from with the 2. Zach Pickens, I liked what I saw from him. 34 and 3/8 inch long arms, 4.89 40 at 305 pounds. Really liked what I saw with him. His 10-yard split was again just a little bit on that edge of slowness with it, but not as bad as Gervon Dexter, fast compared to Dexter. So there was some of the more of the 4th round range guys, right? The late 3rd, 4th round, early 5th round guys kind of bloomed a little bit in this draft. And then maybe some of those guys you're looking at like Dexter, some people talking about in the second, or Ika in the second, they're now more into that 4th, 5th round range.
I thought Mozzie Smith did pretty good. Not that he did a lot, but his arms are almost 34 inches. He's got nose tackle size. He did by far the most bench presses of any defensive lineman. I think Mozzie Smith might be a logical 2nd round target over Ika now, if you're going to do it.
He's the best zero tech in the draft. There's no doubt about it. There's no other guy that you're going to point to in this draft that's a better zero tech and what you want him to do. So and that bench press stuff shows out where that power's on the football field. You see it. I've called him a wall in the middle and a literal brick wall, Brendan, not just immovable. You just can't, doesn't matter. He's so strong at the point of attack.
Yeah.
I like Ben because Ben's got a little bit more of that slippery, slithery kind of nature to him and what he can do, where Maze's just a blunt force object meant to completely destroy the interior of your offensive line. And just, he's not getting into the backfield, but bodies are flying, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but Maze's great. And if we ended up with Maze in the early second round, that would be a fine pick. He would help you out. And when you have a need it right now, Zero Tech, big time right now as it stands.
Yeah. Jonathan, thank you for the $2. Rob Stanton proposed an idea of trading up from 5. Mm-hmm. Well, we've spoken about this before on this show. I'm sure you've spoken about it before on your channel. I've spoken about it on my channel. It's just not going to happen.
I don't see it happening. Number one, Brendan, 100%. Number two, I don't want it to happen. I don't get the process of trading up, because I guess with Rob, he's wanting to trade up to go get, unless there's a quarterback he's in love with, or he wants Will Anderson, because I would think Rob's been out on Jalen Carter. So he's wanting to do this for Anderson. And so, okay, I guess I could maybe be talked into it if you're doing the Will Anderson trade, and then you're doing a trade of like Darrell Taylor for a late second round pick that you're picking back up, and then you're moving that late second round pick to move up in the draft. And so it's kind of like you're going Darrell Taylor to get up and do something like that, maybe on that angle of it. But if you're talking about, we got to give up our 2 native second round picks to do that, or one of our native second round picks to do that, I don't understand it. I really don't. And Will Anderson had a fine combine, and I love Will Anderson, and he's my number 2 player in this draft, but I wouldn't do it. Your strength is here, because not only is it what you lose by trading up in the draft from 5 to, let's say, 2 or 3, it's what you lose by not trading back from 5 to 9 or 5 to 11, like Brendan talked about he did in his recent mock draft. That's the other thing you're losing out in. So you not only give up those assets to go up, but you're losing what you could have gained by moving back. And if you put that, I mean, the net loss on that is substantial to me.
Right. Yeah, it's just not the Schneider way anyway. Like, we can talk about the logistics of it. We can maybe talk ourselves into, like, you could maybe, I really like CJ Stroud. You could talk me into trading up at least a little bit is worth it to get Stroud. But even beyond that, he's not going to do it. Schneider won't do it.
Yeah. I get taking the quarterback at 5. I get that part. The giving up, but the thing with that, with moving up and giving up now extra capital beyond your 5 to devote to the quarterback position, when you've just had a move that you've signaled in Geno Smith, which is a bit about going for the now, where you've now really kind of inhibited that in your draft selecting process. So you better have accomplished that then in free agency at that point, because now it's, the other second round pick, and then our other first round pick. Hopefully we, can fill all of these mighty holes that we have in the rest of the team, right? Because with getting a quarterback at Stroud, you've not filled any of the major holes you have at that point, with only now those fewer picks to do so. I can't understand how I can't see, unless you're so sold on the quarterback, you have the potential to go up and get, because you're going to be competing with other teams on that, Brendan, too, right? Like, you move up to number 2 or whatever, there's other teams trying to move up. You're not paying some low end price at that point to move up in the draft. You're going to pay top end prices because there's competition. There's a bidding war going on.
Right. Let's see here. Nick Moonman, thank you for the $10. Last question I have for you both. Thoughts on drafting Jackson Smith the hyphen at 20 or early second round if he falls? Adding a quick slot receiver with Lockett and DK would be awesome. You take this one.
I think adding him would certainly be awesome, Nick, and you would be able to take your offense to a very, very dangerous level, I think, having Smith in what you could trot out to the football field. It's also a little bit of a pick that's like, it's like a pick that you'd be able to usually be making in the situation if you had other parts more hemmed up. And I think when you're talking about going with Smith and going slot and going heavy there, first issue at play here, Nick, is that you play so many 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end sets, right? Not just 2 and 3 tight end sets. You run that so predominantly. It's so built within your team right now that if you're going to take Smith, you've got to commit to now going to 3 wide receiver sets a high amount of the time to get the use out of him. And I'm okay with doing that, but I don't like doing it if you still have the same number. You're sitting on your same tight ends. You're going to now run your same things, and he's out there for a very limited amount of snaps, truly operating out of the slot. But I love Smith and Jigba. He is the best slot in this draft. But that's the one issue I have with that pick in 20 is, like, you have so many other holes in other places, and the player you're looking at, it could be Cansey there at 20. Do you like Smith enough to take him off Cansey? For me, no. I don't think I quite am at that point. I've also thought with this too, Brendan, that he is likely to be there. And this is the spot where to me, Schneider really has a secondary part of being able to move back, where a team like Dallas is at 26, who needs a slot bad at this point, in my opinion, who loves receivers, who've definitely given up assets for receivers in the past there with Jerry Jones, and they come up from 26 to 20, they flip you the second round pick and you move back a little bit at that point. I think Smith is there for us at 20. I do. I don't think he falls to the second round though. I think the Chiefs, for instance, wouldn't let him get past them. That would be just all day, every day to be like, oh, this is a no brainer. Andy Reid would be sprinting with a burger in his hand up to the podium to toss that one
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not that into it. Obviously, he had a good combine. I think he clearly surpassed Addison, who did not have a good combine, as the best receiver in this class. I don't know what Quentin Johnson is anymore. I feel like I feel like I haven't seen him play football in 8 years for some reason. I don't know what it is. I forgot that. I keep forgetting.
He's got some divisiveness too on him, and where people look at him in his opinion. I was listening to like Steve Smith talking about the other night on his evaluation. He's like, I don't know what to think of this guy. The problem here, Nick, too, is just I think with some hesitancy at Brendan Wheat too, is that if I draft a receiver at 20 in the first round, I really kind of want a guy that can play on the outside sometimes. All right. Like I really don't want to be taking a guy that high that I just have to stick in the slot all the time. And that's really where my hesitancy comes in with this as much as anything too, because I think he'll be a really good player. But are we at the age yet? Have we reached that point as it evolved in football so far that now you do take just a slot only guy, and that's maybe it's getting that point, but I have some hesitancy with doing it.
Cool J, thank you for the $1.99. Should we be scared to draft Carter? We discussed this a little earlier in the show for a little bit there, but I don't know if scared's the right word. It's concerned, I think, would definitely be the better way to put it. And at the end of the day, there's just information that we don't know that shapes the decision that we just need to trust the team to know and be able to derive the right decision from.
Yeah, Cool J, me and Brendan can go through all the tape, and we can try to do all of our own research in the background on the character stuff, and we can do as much as we can to try to research and grind to figure out this information. But as Brendan says, at the end of the day, we don't have the direct access that the teams have through their private investigators, through their contacts with the local college and the coaches, the scouts' connections to the coaches. This stuff definitely very much exists, and that you're going to be able to get a painted portrait that is a lot clearer from their standpoint than this vague, blurry, out of focus shot that we have of the situation. There are some stuff of this that, as he said, Brendan said, that gives you some concerns here, Cool J, but we can really, I think at the end of the day, have ultimate confidence in the fact that our front office is going to do their due diligence, especially on the heels of Malik McDowell. It's like whenever, you go to a fast food restaurant and there's an E. coli breakout, you know where the safest place to eat is the next week in that whole city? You know where it is? That fast food restaurant. So you're on the heels of just having a Malik McDowell situation occur. And that's certainly, I think, going to have this organization on its toes in regards to this Jalen Carter situation.
I think that's all pretty well put. But at the end of the day, we're just going to have to trust the team makes the right decision. Like, it kind of feels like they did with Deshaun Watson last year, because they were very dismissive of the idea of going after Deshaun Watson the whole time. It felt, and in hindsight, maybe they knew that more charges were coming.
Agreed. I think it's in the forefront of the coach's thought, which gives me all that much more confidence that they're going to make the right decision in regards to what they do with Jalen.
Okay, linebacker. Let's talk about the linebackers. I'm talking about the off-ball, inside linebacker types.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about this crop at the combine?
Two of my guys coming in this draft that I was going to be like late round guys that I was just going to have kind of an affinity for, that I'd hope would slip through the cracks, that, nobody else would realize. With both of them had a great combine with Darnell Washington and Owen Popoe. Both those two guys really lit it up, and they're not going to last where I thought that they were going to last at, which, is disconcerting. Popoe 4.39 40 at 225, 35 and a half inch vert, 126 broad. 1.52 10-yard split. He's a fun player on tape. It looked great. Campbell, I thought, definitely was a guy that was important to me, Jack Campbell of Iowa, what he did in this combine, because you had really worries and concerns about his speed on tape and how he moved at times. Does he have NFL enough athleticism to really function at the next level? came out with, I think, some really good short area burst scores. The 40 was still pretty slow at 4.65, so that part that did align, but 159 10-yard split, 37.5-inch vertical leap, and almost 130-inch broad jump. So there's some explosiveness in it. Now, what this does for me, Brendan, on a guy like this, where I'm like, first look at tape is slow, not loving necessarily the instincts on that. Got to go now back to the tape and now reassess what I'm seeing, because there's explosive scores here that I didn't see on the tape at initially first view. That draws me back in to say, I got to rewatch this stuff a little bit more and see what maybe I was missing with that a little bit, because something's not in alignment for what I saw on tape with him. But he helped himself out. He solidified himself as a second round pick at this point, Brendan, most definitely. If not, potentially maybe the second middle linebacker taken in this draft, I think. Trenton Simpson, I think, solidified himself as the number one linebacker in this draft from the middle, and as a guy that's going to be a de facto first round pick. 6'3", 235, not 225, 235, 4'4", 340, 155, 10-yard split, almost 33-inch long arms. He's a guy now with what that informs you on that is not only is he legitimate in what he brings from that quickness, speed, athleticism standpoint on tape, but what he gave you the year before in 2021 is an edge rusher from time to time, essentially a poor man's Micah Parsons type. He now does give you that value to the position, and that cements that a little bit. Because if he came in with Brendan 31.5-inch arms, well, he's not going to be able to come off the edge then at the next level. But coming in with almost that point with those explosive scores, and again carrying that weight at 235 rather than coming at like 225 as some of these other linebackers like Popoi did, that does open that door a little bit more. Puts him in the first round discussion, definitely. Two guys that I think didn't do as much necessarily. Henry To'oTo'o, okay explosiveness, not particularly super fast, not super explosive, matches up with what you see on tape. Noah Sewell, same way. I didn't think he had the greatest of combines, a guy that we're going to look very closely coming into this. I thought he was really going to be able to tear the lid off this combine. That was going to be where he raised his stock. Instead, I thought he was just kind of like, it was kind of average.
Yeah, I thought Sewell actually did okay. He didn't really change my mind on him, but there were some things in that combine performance that I thought were good. But back to Trenton Simpson real quick. One thing I want to stress here is that he came in 10 pounds heavier than I expected. 235. I thought he was 225.
Yeah.
So he comes in 10 pounds heavier and still runs the best 40 of any linebacker except for Popoi.
Right. 10 pounds lighter.
Yeah. So I agree with that. Wasn't thrilled with the performance of Campbell or To'oTo'o either. Also, DeMarvin Overshone did not have a very good combine. He was like one of those day 3 sleepers. Not that fast, not that explosive, only 15 bench press reps. Not great. So little out on him now. I mean, at this rate, he's probably going to be a very late pick. Yeah. Also, Ivan Pace Jr., a guy who I've really been interested in, his arms are like 30 inches long. Like that might be a problem.
Oh, it's a problem. He's a tough guy, man, because, and again, he's not a guy that gives you a multifaceted skill set. He's like this insane blitzer. I mean, just insane, but what you've got to, you draft Ivan Pace, you've got to commit to putting him into that role. And that's where he's got to go to a very specific type of defense, a New England Patriot type of defense that would take that guy and move him all around and just have him attacking 24/7.
Would you be happy with Simpson at 20?
Sure.
Yeah, I actually had a mock this morning where I had Simpson at 20, and people really didn't like it. People were like, it's an off-ball linebacker, and I'm like, it's a really good off-ball linebacker.
It's the best. You stack up, as we talked about this with last year, you start stacking up the best of a position in a draft, and you do that year to year at a multitude of positions, you're going to build a Super Bowl winning squad. So last year you added the 2 best tackles probably in the whole draft, certainly the best left tackle, certainly the best right tackle, it would seem, maybe the best cornerback, maybe the best running back, Brendan. Now in this draft, to start things off, you have walked away with the best middle linebacker in the entire 2023 NFL draft. I don't think that that's a pathway, especially depending on what we do with that first pick up ahead. I mean, if you got Carter and you came out, imagine the first 2 picks, Brendan, you're coming out with the best defensive tackle in the draft and the best middle linebacker in the draft on top of the things I just said. That's not how you don't build an elite squad. It would be great if you could move back a little bit and get him a couple picks later. But again, as I said, I think he could go 13. Some team could jump on Simpson at that point. He has put his value at that spot on the back of this combine performance.
Right. Yeah. I've always been a big Simpson fan, and I still am. And I'll say it again: if we get him at 20, I got no problem with it. So
yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, cornerbacks now. What did we learn about the cornerbacks in this combine?
I think it's good on the good side. It confirms from an explosive standpoint and from a quickness standpoint what you saw on tape with them, and that this is the best. This is the most deepest crew in this draft of a positional group. So it is with the numbers they put up, especially looking at some of the receivers and how they struggled to run fast, Brendan, and then the guys were running fast. You guys were putting up the good times, and they still gave you good size. Christian Gonzalez goes 4.38 40, 154 10-yard split, almost a 42-inch vertical leap, over 133-inch long broad jump from him, 133 inches, and still then had 32-inch long arms as well. So he didn't come in so short and stubby on that. So you got at least the explosive scores. Cam Smith 4.43, Sealy Ringo 4.36. That part was good. Joey Porter came in at 4.46, but he a little bit longer and bigger. The downside with a few of these guys was a little bit of the length stuff. A little bit of the, the arm isn't quite as long as you like with a Cam Smith at 31 and 5/8 or Sealy Ringo at 31 and 1/4 inch arm size. But explosive scores, vert, all that stuff, Brendan, what we knew about the top end of those guys, especially about the cream of the crop, those guys are still the cream of the crop, and that their testing scores match to what you see on tape from them, which is that they're all hyper athletic, hyper fast, hyper quick. It fits.
Mhm. Yeah. Obviously, there's no dire need for like an outside corner right now in Seattle, so I kind of kept my focus of those guys kind of minimal.
Mhm.
The guy who stood out to me was Julius Brents. I think that one's an obvious a target for Seattle if we decide to spend a valuable pick on an outside corner. 34-inch arms, almost 200 pounds, 6'3". Still, a lot of people thought he was going to run like a 4.7 40. He ran a 4.53, so that's pretty good.
He's done as much as any player this offseason to increase his draft stock because that's also coming on the heels of a very solid Senior Bowl performance too. So he's really rise. The problem with him is it's a little bit like the Adewari thing, right? Where everything in the post process of the season is raising the stock, but when you go back and watch the actual tape, you come away going, I'm not really feeling this. I walked away from Brent's tape initially going, this is like 5th round tape, you know.
Yeah. We met with Brents at the combine. I did hear that. We also met with Keely Ringo. I wasn't too impressed with his combine. He was supposed to have like 4.2 speed. It ended up 4.36, which is, it's still not bad. And he's a slightly bigger guy, 6'2", 207 pounds. But I don't know. I wasn't too impressed with Ringo's combine personally. Didn't do anything to make me think we should spend a first round pick on him or anything like that.
What if
Um,
you, Brendan, bring up the safety scores really quick for me? Just look at those safety scores for me real quick, like the best safety scores.
yeah, I'm looking at him.
If you look at Sealy Ringo through the lens of safety and those scores he posted, and my maintenance on this is I feel he's a Malcolm Jenkins type. Malcolm Jenkins came into this league as a corner initially that transitioned to free safety. And that there has been a track record of this in recent years. And with as rugged as he is as a tackler and as a good overall football player as he is, I think that you move him eventually to safety and you have a guy running 4.36 at the free safety position long term. Maybe you start him at corner and eventually move him there. That he would be the best free safety. He would be the best free safety prospect in this draft if you had this guy thing moved out there right now, initially just coming in my opinion. And I could be completely insane on this outlook on him, but I look at 31 and 1/4 inch arms, little shorter arms, didn't look as comfortable with the zone stuff out of Georgia. And I go, man, move him to safety. And we're talking differently about this guy a little bit, I think.
I like it more if it's Brian Branch, though, because Brian Branch is going to be a slot corner / safety. That's more interesting to me right now. If you're going to spend
Oh,
a high
maybe.
value pick on a defensive back to be a safety one day when you're already spending all this money on safety, I think to ease the pain a little bit, you also need to say, oh, they're going to be a kick-ass slot corner for a little while first.
What do you feel though on the difference of that being that you have to take Branch at 20 versus you'll be able to take Ringo with the first, second round pick?
I don't think it's enough to make me feel that differently about it. We need a slot corner. In fact, that's what I'm going to talk about in a second here. But outside corner, like is Ringo as a rookie going to be better than what we currently have? I'm not convinced.
No, I feel you. I think it's that they think of the safety thing of it as much as anything, but I agree with you, man. There's other guys I would rather go to. I love Sealy a lot. I love his upside if they were looking to move him to safety, but that would be my prerequisite to picking him is I'd want to be moving him there eventually.
Okay. Let's see here. The main thing I was looking for with these cornerbacks was trying to find the slot corners because that's what we need. It seems to me that there were three slot corners, like there's a big three
Hmm.
of DJ Turner, who ran the fastest 40 at this combine. There's Trevius Hodges Tomlinson of TCU, and then there's what's the other? Clark Phillips III from Utah, who did not have a very good combine. How do you feel about those three guys, if anything, at this point?
Well, funny enough, my top three slots in this draft are not corners. So Brian Branch is a safety who can play slot. That's my number one slot. Number two would be probably Jamie Robinson, and
Mm,
number three would be Sidney Brown. Those are your
mm.
three. If you're going to go slot specialist here, Brendan, and then we want to attack it in that way, then I say go for the guy that can also play straight safety. Because now I have a guy that's the guy waiting in the wings for Jamal, but now gives me initial value and right out the gate as a slot guy who could play a lot of times a ton of snaps in a football game. Is almost a de facto starter at this point. But I don't see a lot from the guy's tape. You mentioned DJ Turner. Yeah, he's really fast. He could probably do that slot stuff, but he played on the outside of Michigan. So, none of these guys have necessarily put on tape that they are slot guys and what they've shown you. It's just kind of by off their metrics a little bit. And
Mhm.
it's a whole nother world when you got the two-way go kind of routes down there and you got to do the physical stuff and operate like a linebacker sometimes. And, I'd be hesitant on any of these receivers to look at him like that necessarily.
Okay, that's fair. It's not a great crop of pure slot corners. I did notice that. I
No.
was like scrolling through the names and like you go to like the draft network and you look at their profiles and it's like ideal situation, outside corner, outside corner, outside corner. It's like, man.
Maybe Riley Moss. Riley
Mm,
Moss might be a guy out of Iowa because he's got the 30-inch arms at 6 foot, and he posted the really short area burst score, 148 10-yard split, 39-inch vert, 127 broad. That might be a guy that you look at as more of a guy that you could slide inside for with what he's got as his skill set. He's got really loose hips too, so he's got that nice lateral movement you want from the inside.
Uh, Hung Woo Lee, thank you for the 4.99. What do you guys think about Niners getting 7 extra picks? I think it's BS. We didn't get one for Decide. Jimmy G, take the money somewhere else. Yeah, they got a lot of compensatory picks earlier today. Yeah, did you see that?
I did for all their signings and stuff, right? For all their coaches and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and we anticipated that they were going to get that stuff. And that's the way the rules work, and they're taking advantage of it. And good for them on doing that. And that's why the league wanted to do this. I think the upshot here for the Niners is that regardless of their picks, they're getting a lot of picks in the later reaches of this draft, or not later reaches, but Brendan out of that tier. They're getting out of tier two with a lot of these picks, basically. So they're really into kind of the
Yeah. I don't think
yeah.
any picks are in the top 100.
Right. So, I mean, these are all things where they're going to have to be very successful in finding good players in a weekend draft in that area. That you could make the argument that that's as much the weakest place of this draft is in kind of that back end of the draft they'll be picking at that point. And the Niners have got so many problems coming into this offseason that outweigh this little benefit that they get in these extra picks. They don't have any clear understanding of what they're going to do at the quarterback position going forward. And they've got to pay Bosa $30+ million, and they've got 25 free agents on top of that. They got a lot of lines they got to cross here to keep themselves kind of above board. And I think they're going to suffer some hits through the process, that they're going to be, at the end of the day, net weakened by this offseason and the process as it plays out.
I think I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, this is all without them having to pay a quarterback yet. Eventually, they're probably going to pay a quarterback. Maybe they'll be smart and they won't because they've realized they've kind of found a way around it. But usually, the teams that are in salary cap distress are the teams that paid a quarterback.
Yeah, I do think, Brendan, there's still that outside real nightmare scenario I have in this situation that Brady comes out of retirement to help him. I mean, that's the one thing to me
Uh,
that freaks me out in this whole thing. But
I got to be honest, it doesn't freak me out. I think he's got nothing left.
I don't know. You put him in that Shanahan offense, man, and I mean, can he be an upgrade over Jimmy? Is he better? I think he's better than Jimmy right now, and Jimmy was still very
Uh,
functional last year.
I
So
don't know. I just think of him like lollipopping those interceptions to Dallas in the end zone for no reason. Like it's like I don't know, man. I feel like he might not even be better than Jimmy G at this point.
It's possible. It's possible. And look, Father Time's going to get you eventually on it. You're 45. It's going to catch up. But it's you put them into the thing with that Buccaneer team that final year is there was injuries. That offensive line was nowhere near as strong as he walked in. With Brady to flourish, he needs a strong offensive line. If the offensive line isn't strong, now he gets jumpy and he doesn't want to get hit. He needs to know he's got his guys up front giving him that protection. Now, you don't necessarily get that with the Niners, I'll say, because they're so run heavy based and their guys outside of Trent Williams tend to be run blockers first and foremost on that line. But it's my one worried situation because I feel right now they're in a predicament where they've got the Lance thing. Purdy's not coming back, and they're going to have to like talk themselves into some real low end option there, which really then hinges their whole season and their little championship window run thing here. All behind either Trey Lance coming back off of these injuries and still he hasn't played a lot of football, and then not a lot of great backup options behind him, which of course we saw last year for them can, even as talented as their team is, sink their whole season in itself if it goes wrong, especially if it goes wrong early, Brendan, because they don't have a Garoppolo next year, I don't think, to call upon if things go wonky from the jump.
Yeah. Do you think off topic, do you think Jimmy G's contract that he gets this offseason from whoever is more than Geno's contract?
It'll be like a 1 year, probably $20 million deal that he'll end up taking.
You think it'll be a 1 year? Okay.
Who's signing him to a multi? I mean, who's the team?
I mean, there was a rumor that Houston was going to sign him and then spend their pick on a defensive player and then just have him be like the quarterback for the next few years.
You know, it's possible that Houston could do that. They have a defensive coach in D'Amico Ryans they've hired. So certainly you hire a defense coach, you want to start giving him defensive assets. So there could be something to that. I wouldn't think he makes more than $20 million per year though, with his injury history, because even if you like how good he is, you have to acknowledge the fact that he breaks down every single year, and that's got to impact the contract negotiations.
Yeah. Maybe Shanahan brings back Brady and then has him do power QB up the middle runs.
Exactly. What are you doing? It's open. It's open. They're widening out the gap. I know he loves it. He does. And I told you, did you ever get that clip of him talking about how they learned with Robert Griffin they can't do that? It was like an interview he gave, and it's like from a few years ago, talking about that. Like, that's why you can't run those quarterbacks draws up the middle, because they take hits where they can't see it. Like some Niner fan posted on like Twitter. I was laughing my ass off when I saw it. Like,
I didn't see that, but well, I guess not.
Lessons you learned that then unlearn, I suppose, Brendan.
Yeah.
You know, with that.
I used to do that all the time with Vince Young in Madden 2009, and it worked there because it was Madden.
Yeah, you're not going to necessarily get him injured. You hit the reset button if you get him injured on season mode or whatever,
Yeah.
So, you get around it. But yeah, I wouldn't. I don't like the power run up the middle stuff with quarterbacks. That's no, not worth it. Not worth it. The best upside is like a 6-yard run, and the downside is you get his foot turned like this on his ankle.
Yeah. Let's see here. Teddy G, thank you for the $4.99. What do you feel about JMS from Minnesota at 20 or the second round? You lead with this one.
Probably the second pick in the second round at this point is where you can get him. And he's valuable, and I think he's the best center in this draft, Teddy. But I do think that part of where you want to pick people is where you assess the other teams and where they're picking and where they're likely to grab a guy. And I don't think with his current combine performance, he's going to be taken in the first round or even the early second round, which then if you can just hold your stones a little bit and wait till your pick, take him then in the second round at that point, as I would expect him to probably have a little, not a big slide, but just be second round guy, probably the first center taken off the board at that point.
Yeah, I'm fine taking him at our, what is it, 51st, 52nd, 53rd pick? I think that's what
52.
it is. Yeah, 52. Okay. Yeah, I'll take him there. But if he lit the combine on fire, I would have been fine with him at 20, but it didn't happen. Not even close.
Yeah. You're not getting a pure athletic player from the center position like you maybe ideally like, but you're getting one that's good enough in his movement ability. And so that moves him a little bit down.
Yeah. To my recollection, like Creed Humphrey didn't test very well, and he went at the bottom of the second round.
Yeah.
So, I mean, JMS should be in a similar boat where, like, yeah, he can play the position, but he's not a great athlete.
Exactly. I 100% agree.
Okay, one more position, and I don't know how much time we're going to spend on it because it's not a position of high priority for the Seahawks at the moment, but it's safety. I think you had a really good angle on this, though, when you were talking about them through the lens of being able to play in the slot, a la Winfield Jr. So did anything stand out to you from that perspective in this combine?
Sidney Brown's just one of those guys like Darnell Washington for me. Owen Popoe was this way, just kind of a guy. It's my guy. I loved his tape as much as any prospect watching this draft and how he just sort of pops off the tape. I've watched other Illinois players, Devon Witherspoon and whatnot. Your eyes just always get drawn to Sidney Brown and what he's doing. He's fantastic out of the slot, 4.47 40, 1.51 10-yard split, almost a 41-inch vertical leap, 130-inch broad jump, 31.5-inch arms, which is fine for out of the slot. I think that he would be really nice for you in there. I think Jamie Robinson from Florida State can give you exactly kind of the same sort of stuff. He didn't test quite as well as Sidney Brown did, but still tested well enough for what you'd look for in the slot. 1.58 10-yard split, 34-inch vert. And then, of course, I've talked about Brian Branch. He'll go, I think, in the first round. A little bit didn't test as well. He didn't really light this combine up as much. But another guy, Brendan, like we talked about with the Schmidt, who we have a couple of these guys that we've talked about that they didn't test well, but if I turn on the tape, the guy is lightning.
They're
And
football players.
yeah, the football players. And you just need to watch the tape with them, and it's undeniable with them. Some players it's not undeniable. Some players like, well, it's deniable. I don't know what I've got in this guy. This guy's an undeniable guy, though, when you turn on the tape. He's absolutely maybe one of the top 10 players in this draft, just purely, regardless of positional value. But I didn't think that the safeties did a whole lot. I thought they were really underwhelming, Brendan. I was disappointed in Jair Brown. I'm 4'6", 540. He had a good 10-yard split, but man, from the free safety position, yeah, for a guy that I thought had shades of Earl on tape at times, it's a far cry from Earl's 4.37 he ran back in the day. So I was pretty disappointed mightily by the safeties over outside of those real small crew of guys. I thought overall it was pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, and for the record, because people are going to ask, JL Skinner didn't do anything because he's hurt, so there's nothing to report there. But one thing I want to say about that is that Pete has doubled down on this new defense recently, so I don't think Skinner's a possibility. I don't think he would fit with this defense at all.
I can't see it. I like the kid, so I know there's a lot of you've got, I'm sure in your chat I do as well, a lot of folks that really do like this guy, and I understand it. And the tape's fun to a degree, but the limitations of his game just do not fit. You wouldn't have asked Cam Chancellor to run Vic Fangio's cover 2 scheme. That would not have put Cam in a position to succeed or have him do what he does best.
All right. So, fun fact, 2 special teams players ran the 40-yard dash, a punter and a long snapper. I wonder how they make that decision. Like, how does Jake Moody decide I'm not going to run the 40 time, it's going to hurt me, but these 2 guys decide, yeah, I'll run the 40. That's going to boost up my stock like nothing else.
I don't know. Yeah, the not running thing, I really don't get. I can understand you do all the running stuff and you say, well, I'll do the bench later, and then I get that a little bit, but that the way that you learn these scouts do this stuff is they take your best times. That's the way NFL organizations do this. So they don't hold one thing harder to the combine. I don't know if you came to the combine and you ran slow scores, but you came back on your pro day and improved upon those scores, they're going to take the high scores. So there's nothing lost on you unless you're trying to hide something by trying to actually run these drills and go out there and do it. And otherwise, if you miss on your pro day now, you're locked in. So I've never quite understood the mentality of agents in now informing these players a little bit more often of trying to keep them held off and doing that stuff. Like Skinner, you understand he's got the torn pec, but players that were healthy and could have gone and done it,
Yeah, I was disappointed that Stroud didn't run the 40 because I feel like the reason might just be he knows he's not going to run a very good 40. But the thing is, I think he could run like a 4.75 40, which should be enough. That's faster than Mahomes. And that's really all it needs to be with his arm, I think. I wanted to see Levis run the 40. He didn't do it. It was disappointing.
Yeah. I'm very disappointed in Levis. I know why Stroud didn't. The fastest track for any NFL pro days out there in the entire, it's going to sound like you could Google this, Brendan, like it gets mentioned about. I don't know what they use. There's some special surface they use, but Ohio State's renowned for having the fastest track on their pro day players of anywhere in the country. And it's been known for a long time. It's like some surface that's they have the tracks built out of tires, former tire, maybe gives you about, there's something with it with those players. It's renowned for, it's been known about for years that there's something. So he's waiting to run on the fast track at Ohio State where he'll really be able to post those numbers. But with Levis, this would have been where he would have shined. He would have run probably a 4.55 40 or something and looked great doing it. But he probably saw Richardson run the 4.43 and he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. The thing is, though, if everybody knows the track at Ohio State is so good, they're not going to take it that seriously. So does it help you?
If you don't have another number to fall back on, you take the number you have.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, Stroud is going to get drafted high for nothing to do with his mobility or speed or anything like that. So that's
He doesn't
fine.
have to prove the case very hard. So if he just proves it softly, which, like to your point, would be, yeah, they know it's that, but they're, it doesn't. They're well, it's okay. They'll want to talk themselves into it. It's good enough.
Okay, so that's basically a complete look at the combine from all angles. Really interesting results here, and I've already made a few videos about some guys that now really stand out to me as targets for the Seahawks after this combine. Guys like DTR, guys like Roshan Johnson, not guys who are the best at their positions, but guys who make sense for this team in this situation. And I think that's got to start to be the focus as we move closer and closer to the draft.
Yeah. I want to find those fits.
Yeah. And it's kind of the final piece of the puzzle. This and the pro days. Once the pro days are over, we'll realistically have all the information that we're going to get.
We are, and we can make our final assessment on these guys because it is an ever-changing process until I think you get to that point where you're just, a couple weeks out of the draft and you've got your things locked in and you know where you stand on it. And that's where it is. But until you get to that point, you do want to have a little bit of a willingness to be flexible in your outlook on these guys and let it be kind of guided through the whole process.
Okay, so thank you for coming out and hanging out with me tonight to go through this and dissect all of it. We currently got 350 people in here.
Let's go.
We
Yeah,
were very close to 400 for a little bit there, so great night of attendance. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I will be going live on Twitch in probably about half an hour or so. I'm going to post a link to it in the chat right now. Me and my friend are going to be finishing up the co-op on Dead Space 3 tonight.
Oh, all right.
So, hope to see some of you guys over there. We're going to have some fun. Should just take a few hours. Next week, we will be congregating over on the Hawks Nests channel. We're going to basically be looking at the initial free agency decisions because we'll have at that point 4 days of data because you have the legal tampering and then you have the actual contracts starting on Wednesday and Thursday.
That's right. We'll be able to tell if this is going to be a wave 1 or we're back to the wave 3 angle of things from our Seahawks and how they play this by that point for sure.
Yeah, in all likelihood. I mean, you might not see some of the tagged guys get traded, right? Like maybe somebody like a Deron Payne gets traded in like late April.
Agreed.
Because a deal can't be made. That would be a big move. But guys like who are some of the big free agents who aren't tagged? Like Jesse Bates probably gets done quickly. Hargrave. Maybe Fletcher Cox gets done kind of quickly here, although he's getting older. You got guys like Jacoby Myers, I guess, is actually the best receiver in this free agent class. So probably him.
He's going to go quick. If you're a value in this class, because it is a weak free agent class, you're going to go quick if you're a top line guy. So
Orlando Brown.
Orlando's going to get paid by somebody big money. So he's going. Chiefs are not going to retain him. We'll know at least with that. There'll be a lot of the big names will go within that time period because the tampering period speeds everything up just a little bit more. So the Wednesday you've got a lot of deals locked in and know what's going to be what. And again, we'll know the strategy of the team. We'll know by that point, Brendan, okay, I think we know they're not going to maybe be as active in wave 1, but they might be. And that would be a signal, Brendan, if they were, that this is as much a go for it as you and I are maybe kind of hoping for this upcoming year.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be wave 1. It could be wave 2. Guys like Draymond Jones are probably going to be in wave 2. Guys like some of the linebackers, some of the top linebackers are probably like Bobby Wagner would probably be a wave 2 guy. Zach Allen would probably be a wave 3 guy. I would love to have him. So there's nothing wrong with it. You just got to get the right guys at the end of the day.
That's right. It's just, and the way you spent your money before, you do it on an older Bruce Irvin or on an older Benson Mayowa who was never tremendously productive, or on a BJ Finney that didn't start, or Greg Olson, 32-year-old that's breaking down. You're not doing it on guys that are good value or guys that are really, you just see them on that, like this could go wrong in a lot of ways quick, but there'll be some guys there that can actually add valuable parts to our team that aren't necessarily, to your point, the frontline dudes.
Yeah. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens next week. I'm going to be streaming the entire initial 2 waves of free agency. Basically, I'm going to be starting the streams early in the morning and not stopping them until like dinner time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. See what happens. We're going to be covering the entire NFL of free agency. Going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, we will congregate over on the Hawks Nest channel again on Thursday night to talk about what has happened. And there's only one thing left to do.
Gotta let them know.
Mm-hmm. You know, this team has found the most unselfish quarterback in NFL history, apparently.
Let's
They've
go.
locked him up. It's as good as you could have hoped for. There's not a single Seahawks fan that should be the slightest bit unhappy about this scenario, I don't think. All options are still open to us moving forward. We can do whatever we want to do. We've got money to spend. We've got draft picks to use. It's all in front of us. So
It's all there, man.
there's no football on right now, maybe. The team is not playing, but the team is winning. So, with that being said, there's no better time to hit it with a Go Hawks.
You got one donation quickly.
Sorry. Justin Rockstar, thank you for the $2. Seahawks are the first team to talk with Bobby. I did hear this, yes.
Well, that's a good note to finish this out on, Brendan, and that's absolutely right. I would expect Bobby to arrive back here, Justin. Everything on this makes so much sense for him to come back here on like 10 different levels. Get beyond like, is he preeminent Bobby of what he was in his prime? That's irrelevant to the discussion at hand of whether or not he's a fit for this team and what this team needs right now. And this team needs Bobby. So let's go. Bring back our Bobby, and let's not ever forget on this one, folks. Go Hawks.
Mm-hmm.